Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
Oh my!
You caught that, man. For a
let's
guy that's running on booze and sleep, that's pretty good.
He's a professional. That's why.
Fred is a professional. If there was ever such thing as a professional drinker, that is Fred. So, if you notice, you are the first show to have our new addition to the studio. Y'all have hand now. You know, every station has hand.
So you can play with these hands.
Yeah, I don't know why, but it became the one I did have in the studio became fascinating for people, and they just I would notice they would days off and start staring at the hand. I'd bring it over to the table and they start passing it around. So now I guess if this is what I have to do to keep everybody interested and engaged, that everybody now has hand to articulate it any way they want.
Give me a hand.
Yeah, you got hand, Fred.
Hand. Maybe a fist.
Be as vulgar as you want.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Let's chat a little bit of music here. So we fleshed out before the show that we're all roughly the same age. Unfortunately, I'm the oldest of the group by just a couple of years. But generally, we're looking at the youngest being Mr. Vogel at late 40s.
Yeah, 45.
45, mid-40s, all the way up to... So basically a 10-year swing, 45 to 55, and you two gents are in between.
52 next week.
See, he's one of those adults that has to talk about their birthday. I don't get that. I don't get that.
52.
It's a thing. Some people, that's a big thing for people. Birthdays, I don't get it. But yeah, so I think in terms of discussion, it'll be good because we're relatively, as Mr. Vogel just said, I guess we're all millennials, right?
No, Generation X.
Oh, yeah, millennials are one. Yeah, we're Gen X's. I don't know what that means. I was told I was on the end of the baby boomers too. I don't know if it's Paul. It was 66.
Yeah, 69 would be baby boomer. I bet.
Really?
I don't know. I don't label that kind of shit.
Yeah,
I don't
labels and stuff. One of the things I like about the three of you, which is very common with me, is the musical taste that I get, the vibe I get off all three of you is it's roughly the same, which is very eclectic, open palettes. If it's good, you dig it. And if it is good or is not good, depending on, very regardless of the genre, you just don't like it, right? I mean, it's got to be good. So when someone says to you, what kind of music do you dig, Fred? How do you possibly answer that?
I say I dig everything except modern country. Honestly, it's just the one stuff that doesn't sit well in my ear. But I mean, I try to give everything a shot. One of the things I've always said, I just didn't want to be that old guy that back in my day the music was so much better. And I try to listen to a lot of music and try to find really great stuff that's out there. And there really is. You just got to dig for it. And all the stuff that I've always loved was the more rare, off the top 40 kind of stuff, and you still have to dig for that.
What about you?
Deep cuts, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I was raised, my stepfather and my mother, they were very eclectic. Growing up in the 70s, in my household, it was basically the four kings, three kings of the blues. You had Albert King, Freddie King, and B.B. King. But on my mom's side, there was Carole King.
Right on.
And so, Maria Muldaur, those, you name it, we listened to it. We would spend Saturdays and Sundays sitting on our deck on the house, just listening to whatever. My mom would put on Sade albums. My pop would put on Pink Floyd albums. And, that's kind of how it all started for me. So I'm all over the map musically. I even like modern country. So
that's a good thing. You know what I mean? Like everybody has opinions, and that's why music is so great.
No doubt. I don't think I ever asked you where your musical influences came. This should be enlightening for me.
Who, me? Is it my turn?
Yeah, it's your turn. I mean, musical influences for you. Where'd that come from?
The funny thing is, man, is I grew up listening to Pink Floyd every day as a kid. Like my dad was a big Pink Floyd fan.
Okay.
So every night, that's what I went to bed to. I could, he was downstairs and the stereo would be on, and that's all you heard was.
So that was comforting to you after a while, right?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I that's probably. But he had like all albums. I didn't buy my first album. I didn't get my first album until I was like 16, and it was Billy Idol's Rebel Yell. Somebody gave it to me for my birthday, and then after that, it was all downhill. I became like a record buying fool, and but yeah, it was always. But my dad had like every Floyd album there was, and then some. He had like rare tracks before there was like
Uma Guma.
Yeah, he had Uma Guma.
I love Uma Guma.
Yeah, he had. But I mean, he had everything from like Syd Barrett on, and then he had. So you can't even find this. This is So it was like that kind of fun stuff. But he had, he introduced me to Sabbath, and I remember I told Oz one day, I said, my dad bought me, I got Paranoid. My mom and dad bought me Paranoid and the first Black Sabbath record for Christmas. And there we are, like sitting Christmas morning, and we're listening to, Sabbath records, opening presents. And Oz goes, that's pretty messed up, man. But yeah, so it was, I was exposed. I mean, he had Kraftwerk, you know what I mean? He had, all these, Robin Trower.
Yeah, Bridges aside.
Yeah, so there was like a bunch of stuff, So I mean, I drew from it all. But as you and I have talked about from the time you got into my car, the music I have in my head. I mean, my dad had like the Doors, Hendrix, and Zeppelin as well. He had everything. But the music I hear in my head is surf music.
Freaked me out.
And I have a very large collection of surf music, and it's just, I don't know what it is. I wasn't exposed to it young, but that's the music I hear. That's what plays in my head constantly. And I always laughed at. In Third Stone from the Sun, that's what Jimi Hendrix says. May I never hear surf music again. and that's the jingling.
That would be me.
That's the shit that's in my head, man. So I always get a good chuckle out of that. But I mean, I listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan. Yeah, everybody says to me, because I'm with metal bands.
Right.
I do metal acts, and yeah, I was a Zach fan. I was a Sabbath fan. Mm-hmm. I was an Ozzy fan, but. The guys that really got to me playing were Stevie Ray Vaughan and David Gilmour and Hendrix, all Strat guys, and I'm out with you making metal guitars, and being
I get it,
and always wanting a Les Paul.
I get it,
so it's really weird, but yeah, surf music for me.
Dick Dale.
Dick Dale,
the ultimate surf guitarist.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, he played the guitar violently. There wasn't any distortion on it, but you could just hear the pick attack and just he beat the fuck out of the guitar. That's what he did, and he was just a mean person. And, I don't know. My story is very similar and very, very quick. I grew up in a crazy musical family. My dad loved Elvis. I don't know why. God rest his soul. Couldn't take that, but my mother was hip as shit. Yeah,
got the Elvis story.
I know, man. I know.
Don't hate on the king.
I'm not hating on him. Oh no, I had no choice but to love him. Yeah. But it was just so much of it. But my mom was about the same age as my dad, but there was just a different bent there. I mean, the Stones and the Who, and she loved Mick Jagger. And I guess I wasn't born in Long Beach, but they were in Long Beach at the naval base for a while. So she was seeing in the mid-'60s, like some of these British acts come over and play on these little stages and parks and things. So she just kind of like loved that, and then came here, and she was like she was a hippie mom. She doesn't want me saying that, of course, but she dug that music, right? So for me, it was just I liked all that, and I can't tell you how many times I heard the Eagles' greatest hits, that blue covered. I've heard that. Mm-hmm. That and the first Fleetwood Mac record, Rumors, but the first one, the one before that, she wore the grooves out on those, and I just heard that so much. And then finally, when I had a friend bring over Rush 2112 and Kiss Destroyer on the same day, and my whole mind exploded, because it was like, what is this? And both records so different, but what is this? But it was mine. This is what it's no longer that's mom's stuff. the Who and all that. Yeah, okay, this is weird and this is mine. And that was those two records. Just, I think the theatrics, we talked about that last time. It just, the Kiss thing was with me because it was just so different. And there was a I can't tell you the exact reason, and we tried to flesh that out last time, Fred, but I think that the theatrics, it was just something different. You know, there was events, this crazy Van Halen band that like exploded, and of course you had your Pink Floyds and your Aerosmiths, and that was cool, but there was that theatrical bent to the Kiss stuff that just made it more than, and I didn't like comic books, it wasn't my thing, but there was just something visual and tangible there that I could really dive into. So that band just really kind of had a special place in my heart. And then my younger brother, of course, younger brothers do what their older brothers do, and then this whole group of friends just kind of like dove into that band. So we had that going on. You kind of remember a little bit of that.
I remember Brian wearing his Fly By Night T-shirt to school. Yeah, definitely.
That's about right. But it was just once I heard like Detroit Rock City. And then conversely, I heard like the opening, like synthesizer 2112, as different as that was. Those two things, just nothing that I could do in my life, including my passion, which was baseball. Everything else took second fiddle to that. Than me going in, putting that stereo on, putting those old Sylvania headphones on, and just like shutting the door and shutting out the world and just reading every single letter of every word of every sentence on those album covers, memorizing it like it was a homework project. Taking tracing paper and drawing the Rush Fly-By-Night owl, you know, and just the 2112 logo, and just that was all like a part of what I consider to be an enchanted childhood that is not unique to me. I'm sure there's similar stories, millions of them for our era, but that's how strong the music thing got to me. It wasn't about movies, and I know you're a movie buff, you're a movie maker, Fred's a movie buff. That was lost on me because I don't think I had access to movies as a kid, but I had access to music, and that was what just set my whole life on a trajectory where I was just going a certain direction that usually gravitated toward the soundtrack in my head. And that's kind of where I'm at today. It's the soundtrack is every day. There's just constant music in my head. I'm always tapping on something. I don't know if that's neuroticism or
no,
what it is,
I'm right there with you.
You know,
it's the beat, man. It's the drums.
I think so.
It's in your soul. It's in your soul. It's in all of our soul.
Oh yeah. When you look back at decades in music, I mean, if someone forces you to look at decades, you know, so because I think we tend to label things in society, right? Genres and labels and eras, but if you look at decades, like when you think of 70s rock and roll, think of 70s popular music, not just rock and roll, 70s popular music. What to you, who was in there, and what about that decade made it special to you?
I mean, there's just so much that came out in the 70s. So you had like the spill off of like the late 60s, you know, Hendrix, and then it goes into really great R&B was coming. You know, you had I'm having a brain fart right now. But you did, you had some really great Motown coming out at that time.
Oh, the Spinners, man, the Spinners coming out.
And then then like 76, you know, punk rock starts to like weave, like get in there. And
yes.
Then there was that honky tonk thing going on as well that was going on there, and disco, and I mean, it was just, there was so much stuff going on in the 70s, and of course, you can't forget about like Kiss and AC/DC and a lot of those bands.
Why do you think there was so much diversity, though, in the 70s? That genre has got a lot of diversity, man. Like, you think we have so much diversity now? No, we don't. In terms of music, it was that decade.
Oh, my God. So much diversity. So
Yeah,
much
it's true.
And then even hip-hop came out of that, you know? The
Very-
beginning of hip-hop came out of that.
Yeah, short time later. You know, I think the Midnight Special.
Don Kirshner, man.
Yeah, man, and just being a kid and staying up on a Saturday night and watching that Wolfman Jack. But the beautiful thing about that,
for the Wolfman.
yeah, definitely, that was a great tune. But the beautiful thing about that show is that, you know, you had your Soul Trains, you had your American Bandstands, and those shows were primarily just highlighting bands that come out and lip sync a song, that type of thing.
Right.
the Midnight Special was the first show to actually really go past midnight, first of all. But it was also the show that highlighted bands playing live.
Live as shit.
Yeah, man. And I actually own that DVD set,
Yeah,
man.
right on.
And,
There's some powerful performances on
absolutely. And I just think from my standpoint as a music fan growing up, that was the one thing that kind of sent me over the top as far as being exposed to all these different sounds and bands.
And you would have been really young though when that was out. I mean, that hit you early,
Very young,
early.
very young. And but you know, I can remember just staying up with my parents on a Saturday night because again, my house, it was always music all the time.
And that probably was even before Saturday Night Live. Because Saturday Night Live was a 1976 phenomenon, right?
Yeah, it came out in 75.
Okay, so Kirshner's rock concert was 71 on or something like that? 72 on? How many years that run? Any idea?
I want to say it ran until like 75 or 70. No, I'm going to say even a little longer because I'd say maybe late 70s, 78.
Did
maybe.
it compete with Saturday Night Live or a different channel ultimately? Did they rub? I'm trying to remember.
I was too young, but
Yeah.
I caught it later on and learned to really appreciate seeing those like live bands on there.
Well, you can see performances on that show that you just can't find anywhere else.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
not just individual performances, but I mean like seeing bands play actually live in film footage that you can't find anywhere because usually everything's choreographed and synced.
Yeah.
73 to
Right.
81.
It ran to 81?
Don
Yeah.
Kirshner's Rock Concert Series, 73 to 81.
There was also something called, was it called ABC's In Concert that competed with that for a while?
I remember ABC's In Concert.
Because that was, I think it was like a poor spin-off of to rival that, where it was live acts. It was trying to do the same kind of thing, but that was a little bit different, I think, because I remember seeing like even as late as 83, I think Sabbath and that weird incarnation they had with Ian Gillan for that one album in 83, there was a version of that. Something In Concert. But yeah, that live performance, again, this live performance was in the 70s possible. Mm-hmm. Not really sure even, if in 80s, 90s, and today, live performances are actually possible. Real live performances.
Wow,
anyway,
that
right?
it started. In Concert started in 72.
Okay.
And it went to 75, but they kept changing the name. So ABC In Concert started in 91 to 98, but they also have it listed here. It was so I guess it started in 72. It was renamed ABC In Concert in January of 92, and it ran to 98.
Okay.
So that's a good, healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actual live performances too.
Yeah, I think it says Alice Cooper premiered in the
Wow.
premiered in there in 72.
And just to answer your original question, E,
Yep.
it's because you asked like, why do you think the 70s of all decades was kind of the most diverse? I think that's kind of what you were asking. I don't know, man. I think somebody just posed a question the other day on Facebook. Who do you hold responsible for being the most important person in rock and roll? My answer was Robert Johnson. Mm-hmm. You talk about the Delta Blues. I think today's rock and roll, everything stems from that. At the end of World War II, the Delta Blues was introduced to Great Britain. You had all those spin-off bands, Clapton, Cream, all that. The Who, Zeppelin was essentially a blues band.
No doubt.
So I think the 70s just kind of was the time where all of that just kind of culminated between the blues taking a spin to the rhythm and blues, the blues taking a spin to hard rock, metal. You had Deep Purple, who really kind of introduced metal to the world. So I think essentially all of those styles kind of culminated in their own fashion from the blues. It was just everybody's take on that. And I'm not saying like, the 12-bar blues, but, there is that. But bands were able to expand on that. And that's what we see with Black Sabbath. Because essentially you hear some of their stuff, you're like, wow, that sounds like some Delta Blues stuff, but a little bit heavier. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the 70s, like you had mentioned, the Spinners, that whole R&B scene. It just seems like that was the time where that all just came together. So I don't know.
It was a very fertile era.
Yeah.
What you think of
more ingredients mixed into the music culture. You know, you just had so much, and everybody was influenced by so many. If you look at, the Rolling Stones were influenced by Little Richard, and if there was no Little Richard, there'd be no Elvis, and it just goes on and on and on, and those are just ingredients to rock and roll.
Yeah, there's no doubt. What do you think about the 70s? Can you remember the 70s, Fred?
I remember the 70s well. Well, that's exactly. I mean, if you look, there's a touch of everything. I mean, and it's going. And in all honesty, I mean, I have more than just surf music on my iPod, but it's a very diverse. 70s. I mean, you had explosions in music all over the place. You had the Bee Gees, who originally started in the 60s and hit the height with the disco era, there in the 70s. You had, again, the crossovers from the 60s. The beginning of it, you had Sabbath, who started in the 60s. Well, 70, I guess, for Black Sabbath. But you had the Doors coming out of there. You had Pink Floyd. You had Hendrix. To lead everything off, and everyone that those folks influenced through the 70s, it's just, it's amazing to see in one spot, in one period of time, everything just kind of clicked, and you had all these great musicians playing great songs at the same time. I mean, you had all the classics then too. Aerosmith. You had Alice Cooper, who I just mentioned, coming up. All these great, and these things are still around. These guys are still around.
Some of them.
Kiss.
Some of them.
So that's a testament to what the music was then and what it meant to people. All these.
Well, I think it's a testament to what the initial mark that it made on the public, where maybe music today, not today, but I mean over the last couple decades might not have in all instances been able to make that type of mark initially, because they don't last as long. Right. Some bands do, but generally speaking, there's been a lot of, I think Stone Temple Pilots had all the talent in the world and uniqueness and all that, and they made a mark, but they never made an Aerosmith mark or a Kiss mark or, Boston mark.
You see that a lot now.
Yeah, great band, and all kinds of different ways you can give them all the appropriate applause, but did they make a mark like those legacy bands? Not really.
Well, there's a lot of artists that kick the door down, and then there's a lot of artists that just knock on the door.
Yeah, true.
And when you think about the 70s too, so I was born in 76, and my earliest memories of music was my mom listening to all this light rock that was so popular at that time. Andrew Gold and
yacht rock.
Totally. And I just remember looking up what was the biggest hit during your birthday, and I remember just being it was a super light rock. I'm like, wait a minute, but in 1976 you also had
everything.
You had everything.
Yeah, I mean 76 was a glorious fucking year for a lot of reasons, but I mean, to me, when I think of those two records, of course, 2112 and Destroyer, and a bunch of other amazing records came out in 76. But it was interesting that why I think that new Aerosmith, I think Rocks came out in 76 because Toys in the Act was 77, or maybe. The point is, you had Sabbath kind of waning by 76.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff was pretty not great. You had Zeppelin was kind of presence was around, and they were kind of not really with it or what was going on. So you had those bands ebbing. The Stones in 76 put out Black and Blue, which is practically a dance disco record that they were losing their audience. So you had those early 70s, late 60s bands starting to wane or trying to. And the Who, I think the Who was pretty solid in 76, but I think generally those bands might have been ebbing a little bit mid-decade, and you had this new energy. You had American bands playing that style of music that were clubbing us over the head. Van Halen the next year. I think it's just the mid-70s, I think, was American rock's beginning. I mean, there were American bands before that in the early 70s, but they weren't making big-time noise. To me, it happened kind of like in the mid 70s, I think, in the late 70s and early 80s for American rock.
Makes yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to dissect the decades. The 70s is, and again, as time ebbs forward, you know, and our memories fade and generations change, you know, you wonder how the 70s is going to be looked at and how it's looked at today as opposed to 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
We're still talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, 45 years later.
Yeah, and that's great though.
No, that's just the power of the music coming out of that era. The other day, I was watching one of my favorite shows from the past called "What's Happening."
I don't know what's happening.
I don't know if you guys remember the Doobie Brothers episode. That when the Doobie Brothers showed up
I don't
on
remember
that show.
On that show,
I got to check that out. That's awesome. That's awesome.
But that was, you know, that was really cool too. At that moment in time,
yeah, what a band!
You know, television was bringing in musical guests, you know, to kind of cross over because, you know, television, you know, mixing the, television
Saturday
with the music.
Live did a lot to do that.
Absolutely.
I think, you know, because there was no genres there. One week they'd have a metal band, next week they'd have like a Carole King. I mean,
Right.
you just, you know, that's a good point. That's a real good point. Yeah. When the 70s was coming to an end and the 80s started, it was almost like there was a seismic change. And I think MTV, you can say, well, that in 81, that was kind of the thing that did it, right? But production-wise, Fred, the synthesizer had kind of coincided almost with the decade change, if you really look at it. I mean, there was synthesizers in the 70s. I mean, Rick Wakeman and all that, I get it. But in terms of mainstream songwriting, it was like 79-ish, I think, that Moog and those companies, there was like a seismic change towards synthesizers.
Yeah, it became the hip instrument, you know. Everything featured a synthesizer because you could do a lot of little things with it. You could have trumpet sounds. You could have funny little sounds. It just became, they just discovered a use for an instrument, and it a lot of people, you know, it just came out, and there it is. You have a whole new sound. Now you have techno and new wave and shit like that.
New wave.
Yeah, it was very futuristic.
Yeah, well, that's what I was looking for the word. That's exactly the word.
It was very futuristic, and you started hearing these like notes, and you're like, "What is this?"
Yes,
you know.
Yeah,
but I have to admit, I want to say the synthesizer is what made me lose Rush. When Rush, I know,
dare you.
blasphemy.
Blasphemous.
When Rush came out with Signals, I was like,
yeah, that was a seismic change for that band.
it's a good album. Don't get me wrong. I did not dislike it, but it just wasn't what I expected.
Well,
from
in
Rush.
that band in particular, not to get too nerdy, but was it that album really, or was it the next one, Grace Under Pressure?
That one was even worse for me. Yeah,
yeah, because I could still hang with it through Signals. I mean,
Signals still was good for me. But
well, it was kind of it was similar to Moving Pictures, their big one. But then when they hit Grace Under Pressure of new producers, they dropped Terry Brown. That was the big thing, because producers are everything sometimes, you know. I mean, they worked with Terry Brown all those years, and they changed it, and then their sound changed.
Right.
And but you know, we'll get into eras of bands in a little bit. But the 80s in general, 81 MTV happened, right?
when they showed music.
Right.
On
yeah,
TV.
when it actually was music television. But you can't underestimate the effect, the seismic effect of adding visuals to music and how the public just ate that up.
Oh my God, I loved it.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, there's songs.
loved it.
Yeah, there's songs that I only love because of the video. Like a song like "Everybody Wants to Rule the World." I watched that video. I mean, it's a good song if I'm listening to it on the radio, but
It's
I
an
watched that
earworm.
video, and there's something about these guys driving down the highway, the sun setting in a convertible roadster, while the guitar solo is going on. Like, to me, it all just came together for me. Like, that's why I love that song.
The visuals.
Yeah, definitely. So that was huge, paramount.
You were addicted to MTV?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was on every day, all day long, and you know, I just didn't get tired of that music. You know, there was a lot of variety too back then. You know?
Oh, most definitely.
And you were seeing like older bands videos, like, you know, at that moment in time when MTV was looking for content, they were pulling stuff from like the late 70s just to get on there.
Absolutely, because
You know,
think
'cause
about
we-
what
oh, it's
existed
like
in
we didn't, they
81.
didn't have much.
Right.
Yeah, think about what existed in 81.
Well,
Not
look at the
much.
very first video ever shown. Video killed the radio star. I mean, whoever heard of
the Bungles?
Yeah.
Bungles, yeah.
whoever heard of those guys? So that's,
and if you go back and if you can find the early broadcasts from 81, 82, that content's amazing because you're seeing like, and bands were doing really interesting stuff with film, but they didn't have an outlet for it. Like some of these, like I like Boz Scaggs. That's kind of like my outliers. I like digging into his catalog. Not that there's a lot there, but what's there is really good to me. But he was taking film cameras into rehearsals and then choreographing like through the song, like backstage kind of nonsense in the whole process, and then producing like a music video, but there was no audience. When HBO started in the 70s, and we were either too poor or my parents weren't going to pay for it. I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. We were told that we didn't have the money for it, but I believe they did, Mom. But when we couldn't get it, this line would be squiggly, and you'd try to look. But Rush was making full films of songs. I guess they did to promote it, and they were selling it to HBO, which was playing filler between movies. You used to have to wait between the movie start times. I was seeing like Rush, Closer to the Heart, and stuff from the 70s. So bands, and Kiss certainly was filming stuff. Bands were filming. I don't know if it was video or was it film. You'd be better to tell me that in most instances. But
there were a lot of live concerts that were filmed, back then.
Yeah,
the
Song Remains
the
the
Grateful
Same.
Dead movie.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the Rainbow Bridge, which would be Hendrix. You can go on. I mean, it's been going on a long time. It just wasn't done into that really small 2 to 3 minute music video. And the 80s, they just started being super, super creative. You look at like Billy Idol's like Dancing with Myself, like that video. It's like, oh my God, or Aha's, music video, and it's groundbreaking. Animation. It's groundbreaking filmmaking because
That's when it was great.
You're telling a short story, really.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember seeing the Aha video, "Take on Me." I guess it was, and just seeing the way they blended like real life with animation.
Yep.
And and the money that was spent, I cannot imagine in that time how much some of those videos cost. When now you couldn't get a record company to pay for a band's lunch.
Yeah.
But imagine what they were spending on videos.
Yeah.
At that time.
And again, as the 70s had, a diverse batch of creativity come out, then now it became who can make the best video or the most, most of our. And so you had a different explosion in an artistic way in video production.
Yeah, Thriller. Michael Jackson Thriller.
That's the best
Game changer.
example.
That's the game changer.
Yeah.
That is a
Truly.
great example. Now, years later, a lot of musical artists complained that, well, we lost our focus and video became the priority, and a lot of them will poo-poo it now or dismiss it like, we lost our way. See, I don't look at it that way. I thought that was fantastic. What if that never had happened? What if visuals and music never really merged like let's say the thing that never happened. I can't imagine that not happening, but just say it never happened. Think about what we would have lost.
Right.
Oh my God.
I think you could even take.
I want to be sitting here right now.
Right.
Well, good point.
Because Michael Jackson's Thriller was.
That's what you said.
The making of Michael Jackson's Thriller was like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Watching like Rick Baker create these, zombies and the Wolfman character that he did for Michael Jackson, and John Landis, who is like this guy directed Animal House, and American Werewolf of London, and now he's directing for Michael Jackson.
Right.
And I know for people my age, you got excited for that next Michael Jackson video because you knew that it was going to be something spectacular. It wasn't just...
And they genuinely were.
Yeah.
Like, at least visually anyways.
Dirty Diana was a good one.
Even the songs, I think of the one song that he had like in 91 that had like the Egyptian theme, and it was just a crazy video. It was black and white.
Black and white.
Well, there was Remember the Times, I think.
In between that, maybe.
But black and white was a big one. He had like Macaulay Culkin in it.
Yeah, it was almost like a full feature film.
Yeah.
Right? And what was the one where he was jumping? The one that he got criticized for because he was jumping on it was like a street and there was like beat up cars, and Michael Jackson was jumping on top of the roofs of the cars and beating the cars.
The Way You Make Me Feel, maybe, or
maybe because it was just him
Dirty
dancing.
Diana, maybe.
It was just criminal. Well, that was a big
Smooth Criminal.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, just I mean, so when you look at artists that coming out of the '80s, the big ones. Okay, let's talk pop for a second. We'll talk rock in a moment. I think of Michael Jackson and Prince as being like, no, Jackson from a pure popularity and probably money standpoint was definitely higher than Prince, but Prince was there. But were those artists musically good enough to have made it without the aid of video in that era? Let's just say for whatever quirky parallel universe that MTV had not hit until 91, would that 80s phenomenon with Michael Jackson and Prince, would that still have been a thing?
Absolutely. Well, you had Michael Jackson, you know, he was already in our mindset from the Jackson 5, right? Tons of videos for the Jackson 5, plus you had an animated cartoon for him.
You did.
So he's there. Prince, you know, Prince was an all-around super talent.
Oh, there's no, that's unquestionable.
A lot of people don't realize, like, you know, Michael Jackson was amazing in what he did, but like, you had Quincy Jones pulling some strings. You had a lot of people making Michael Jackson.
Right.
You get
Prince.
You get it.
That's one dude that was just a powerhouse all the way through.
Yeah, playing all the instruments.
And let's face it, Purple Rain was a pretty awful movie. Aside from the music, acting was pretty terrible. But I think
Morris Day, they should have named an Academy Award for him.
But I think, you know, people wanted to see that. You know, people wanted to see what more Prince could offer, even especially on the big screen. But I think at the end of the day, his music is what always pulled him through. But you know, even speaking of visuals in music, I mean, you could even take that back to the hippie acid tests. You know, when bands are up on stage and everybody's on LSD and they have the screens and it's all, you know, visuals, and you know, and so
I hate that as a kid. You'd see like stuff coming out of the 60s or 70s, and you'd be sitting there and there'd be all these like spacey.
Right.
That didn't. Yeah,
the oil and water.
Oil and water. Yeah.
Oil and water. Yeah. I didn't get that as a kid.
But I think the point is that, you know, I think somehow our mind equates visuals with music and enhances both of those senses.
No doubt.
In our minds. So to answer your question, where would we be without music videos? Where would those artists be without music? I don't think they would be as far along without music videos at this point.
So we would still know them. See, Prince was already on my radar. The 1999 album was huge, but even before that, there was Controversy, which was off the Controversy album.
Yes.
I think. And then he had an album in '78 called For You, which I knew because there was a song. There was one hit song off of that record. He was on my radar. I just musically, it was dance music.
Right.
I'd like to go dancing. So I think that he was successful as Michael Jackson. My thing is, though, they became stratospheric. Was it the Thriller album, or was it the Thriller album along with the Billie Jean video, the Thriller video, that really propelled him?
See, that's interesting, because in my mind, I think Off the Wall is a better album for Michael Jackson than Thriller.
Oh, is really? Why do you feel that way?
I do, because I just think I just enjoy the songs on that album more than the Thriller album. And that's just me personally.
Yeah, I understand.
But they're both solid albums as far as I'm concerned. But I guess in my mind, I'm thinking Thriller is more significant because it did have the musical video background or backing than Off the Wall.
Okay.
Off the Wall was basically, there was no visual stuff, so it doesn't really get the credit it deserves.
Got it.
Versus Thriller.
It's definitely a better dance album than
Off the Wall.
Off the Wall.
Yeah,
than
I
Thriller.
would think so too.
But I mean, you have those mega hits, man. You got Beat It, you have Billie Jean, you have Thriller. I mean, it's, you know.
Well, I think every song. I mean, this is
PYT. I mean, there's a lot of
every
great
song
songs.
on Thriller had airtime.
Yeah,
It's true.
I mean, how many albums do you know in your lifetime that an artist can say every song? Because there's always got to be a throwaway or two on every album, right? It's filler. Most acts will admit it.
Right.
But that song was like, I think of Fleetwood Mac Rumors. Every song on that album got airplay, got FM airplay, which is even crazier. FM album rock airplay, but that there was hard to pull. I don't know. I wonder if Prince and Michael Jackson would have been that stratospheric had they not had visuals.
I don't think so. No, I really don't.
I mean, we would have known them. I think their music was definitely strong enough on their own. They would have etched a hell of a career for themselves. But
so let's talk about this real quick.
Okay,
Elvis was huge. 55, 56, 57 goes to war, comes back. Now there wasn't many music videos for Elvis,
True.
but Elvis
movies.
got into movies.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the culture was seeing Clam Bake and all these different Elvis movies, where Michael Jackson, and just mass promoted. Like, you can get Elvis pictures here and Elvis T-shirts here. Michael Jackson was the same way. Like, growing up, like, my first concert was the Michael Jackson Victory Tour in 1984.
Yeah.
And at that moment in time, you can buy the Thriller jacket, you can buy the Beat It jacket, you can buy studded socks, the studded gloves, you can buy every poster you can think of, stickers, puffy stickers. I mean, the guy was just marketed so much. That's why you have the King of Rock and Roll, and then you have the King of Pop. Prince didn't have that.
Good analogy.
Right.
Good analogy.
Prince was, more artistic, and he really wanted that. He knew where he stood, and he was, and like in the 80s, you had Madonna, you had Michael Jackson, you had Prince, and those guys were the heavy hitters that came out of that early early 80s right there.
Right.
That made that. If you think of, tell me, like, who are the top 80s acts? You have to mention those guys.
Yeah, Springsteen probably.
I was going to say Springsteen.
Phil Collins. I mean,
But,
not that I don't
but
like
Springsteen,
it, but
he transitioned.
He
what
did.
I mean? He transitioned from,
So is he an 80s star or a 70s star, in your opinion?
Okay, so being from New Jersey,
Yeah.
I was a Bon Jovi guy, and I didn't like Bruce Springsteen. It wasn't until later on in my life where I went and
it.
started to go back into Bruce's
River.
early catalog and being like, wow, man, this guy is so good. So much better than Born in the USA. Because I could only watch that video 100 times and was ready to shoot myself.
Yeah, Courtney Cox.
Yeah. But I mean, like, but Bruce, again, like, he's gone from 70s rock and roll, playing on the boardwalk kind of guy, to being the huge hit, an artist in the 80s, to now going kind of full circle where he's just that legend guy that can play anywhere he wants to. If he wants to play, Heinz Field, he can do it. If he wants to play the Stone Pony, he can do it.
Yeah.
I think, what's also interesting to look at is, we're talking about bands that probably could have been sufficient without music videos. Michael Jackson, Prince, they would have been sufficient without music videos. I'm looking at a band that was probably made by music videos, like a band like ZZ Top. Their videos were so significant to their success in the 80s. I don't think without those videos anybody would really even care about ZZ Top these days.
So this is my thought. They would be a step above, but not much above, like a band like Argent, coming out of the 70s, where there was 2 or 3 hits, Cheap Sunglasses, and but you're right. I think that was a band that was perfectly made for video. Well, it was someone's vision. I don't know if it was their vision, but if someone around them had a vision for how to brand that.
I mean, who doesn't remember?
Videos.
Yeah, who doesn't remember?
And the songs were solid. It's rock
Absolutely.
They're
songs.
solid songs. And I think that the videos help people go and say, oh, is there more from these guys? And you go back and you look at the back catalog and you're like, oh my goodness, LaGrange, got all this.
Oh my God.
All this stuff, Blue Jean Blues, and you go back and you found, Jesus Just Left to Chicago. And you're like, wow, there's different stuff than Eliminator.
Springsteen too, I think, right?
And they were huge. You can't. ZZ Top was huge in the 70s. Like, those guys just did big tours with gigantic stage show like nobody ever seen before.
They brought cows on stage like a rodeo through
Yeah, you're right. Maybe that was the wrong analogy.
But it was a different time. But so they were very smart, and they played to the culture, and they played to the moment in time where, hey, we need to have these videos, and if it wasn't for that, I would have never discovered their early stuff.
Yeah.
It would have
you
been
have
like, you know, TV Dinner is my favorite song. Really. The video with the little monster coming out.
Yeah.
And the three girls in those videos never heard either.
Oh,
So,
God,
you know,
no,
that
no.
went a long way as a
Yeah,
young
that
hormone.
didn't- That yeah, I mean, there was
Sexy legs and cars.
That definitely did not suck.
Yeah.
I will say, as a Kiss fan, I've always felt cheated in a way because I felt cheated for the band. Because if there was ever a band on the planet that could have been the perfect marriage for '81 when the start of the MTV, and if that had happened, I think would have been the biggest thing ever. Not talking about, you know, maybe, you know, artistic skill, but in terms of promotions,
Sure.
had that band had the benefit during their heyday of MTV, as opposed to being in an unmasked era trying to hang on
Right.
at that time. It just didn't synchronize. MTV just never. They were too late. They were too early.
Yeah, they were too early.
Right.
But they did have, you know, Love It Loud.
Was
that video in Kiss makeup
Yes.
was pretty amazing.
No, and it still is off of a very amazing album. Doesn't get any credit. The Creatures album.
Yeah.
Right before the makeup came off.
Yeah.
But I think they were kind of like at the very tail end of them, and it was a shame because had that been like in '76, I mean, because think about it, in '76, when could you actually see Kiss outside of maybe a commercial or once in a blue moon a made-for-TV movie or
77. Right?
It was just there wasn't videos. There wasn't. I mean, your parents were hearing about this thing, and it's like, you know, not an iconic band, but the Sex Pistols, if they had a visual element in 76, 77, 78, the impact might have been even crazier.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we were hearing about this band that was talking a song called Bodies, talking about abortions and just, you know, and making fun of the Queen of England. And we heard about this stuff. As a young kid, we couldn't really even, at 10 years, 12 years old, I couldn't relate to it. But it was like horrifying, but curious, right?
Yeah.
But there was no outlet outside of seeing the record maybe in a record store because they weren't being played on Don Kirshner's rock concerts. So that legend was there. Kiss was kind of a legend
Right.
in the 70s, but there wasn't anything tangible to wrap your arm around.
No, they missed it. And then they came out with no makeup, and nobody wanted to see those guys' faces you know.
Is that why they went without makeup? They were trying to
just-
reinvent themselves for
absolutely.
MTV?
I think to hear Stanley say it, he just was tired of putting it on, and he was, you know, he looked like an '80s rock star, Paul Stanley. He looked on the same genre, John Bon Jovi. Now Gene kind of didn't, and the rest, Vincent certainly didn't, and so I think that Stanley felt fine with no makeup on. I can't say the other ones really did, and it didn't. In the first video is comic. If you go back and look it up video, it's pretty comical when they're standing there and they're kind of
trying
like,
to look tough, you know. Gene's looking real
oh
tough.
yeah, and Paul looks completely like, you know, I'm ready. Right. But the rest of them were just kind of like, it's cringeworthy, man.
It is.
But that's a band that just didn't synchronize. That the timing was just off.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, so maybe for that, but Kiss still, you know, they had their moment, and you know, they. I love seeing early Kiss footage.
Me too. And that it's film, not
Film,
video. Yeah,
black and white, like, you know, in black and white. You know,
Oh yeah, there's some full concerts out there in '75.
I love that.
And black
That's like
and
my
white.
favorite stuff to see of Kiss. Is like definitely like '75.
Yeah,
Live.
I know there's a lot of stuff in the can from that band that the Gene and Paul just don't release, but they've got it. They've got film after because I guess Bill Coyne and Neil Bogart were filming all kinds of stuff. Yeah. They just never made the.
I bought all those DVDs that came out. It was like the Kiss anthology that had like Kissology.
Yeah, I got that stuff, and that stuff's good. I just think that's a band that missed the MTV generation
Right.
too. About American rock for a second. So was Van Halen, in your opinion? How do I say this? There was Boston, Aerosmith, and Kiss before Van Halen. The heavies. I mean, you can maybe kind of throw Foreigner in there, but they weren't quite as big. Maybe I'm missing someone. I'm sure I'm probably missing someone, but those were kind of like the heavies in American rock coming out of the '70s. And then Eddie arrived, right? And you can't, I mean, maybe you and I will have this discussion, but I can't put it any stronger. What Eddie and David were in 77 and 78, it changed the landscape, man. Would you not agree?
Oh yeah, his influence on guitar playing and bringing the interest of it, you know, it launched a whole generation of new guitar players, which developed their own styles. And from Eddie, you have, you know, I don't want to say Randy because Randy Rhoads was his own thing.
Yeah.
But you have the George Lynches, the D. Martinis, you know, these guys now that are guitar heroes, and now they're making metal music out of, like, you know, a harder rock. But I'd say Van Halen was party rock, you know. But now you've got he influenced a whole different breed of up and comers that, you know, took their music into different directions. And you have the Red Beaches, and like I said, the George Lynches and the Warren D. Martinis, who go on and become the West Coast, you know.
The early '80s.
Yeah,
West
the early
Coast
'80s metal. So all that comes out of Eddie's influence, guitar playing wise. The statement that he stamped and made on music was incredible. It was a game changer. It was
what? Let's dissect that. What was it about the first riff off of "Running with the Devil" that when you hear that, no matter what station it's on, everything that you've heard before that just doesn't. It isn't a matter of being good or bad. It's just, this is just different. Is it the drenched reverb? Is it the brown sound in terms of that particular Marshall and that particular Frankenstein guitar combination? What was it that made it that different? Because I will tell you, Ritchie Blackmore, although never really loud in the mix in Deep Purple, had some very unique reverb drenched tone.
Sure.
It just didn't sound like that.
It's his magic. You know, just like it's when you hear Purple Haze or Foxy Lady for the first time, you know, just imagine hearing that. Or
with better production. We got robbed on that stuff.
Yeah, or I mean, like, even like the Kinks, you know, and just hearing "You Really Got Me" for the first time, and like, whoa, what kind of sound is coming out of that? I just think that, you know, that's, you know, that artist, you know, a guitar is a guitar. It's that person playing that guitar that really makes that instrument come to life, and that energy that's coming out of them.
Right. And,
you know, Eddie Van Halen had that in folds.
Yeah, when you heard "Running with the Devil," you remember
it was the tones, man. Like, you hear that tone, and I still strive as a guitar player myself to dial up on an amplifier to get anywhere near the tones that Eddie Van Halen would put out there. Because
that can get you the round down. We've done it. We had it, but we
can get close.
I'm
to
not
it,
saying we played like Eddie, but we had the crunch.
We can get it.
Yeah, it's something. That was intoxicating. And to this day, I mean, I get so excited when I hear the opening drone of "Running with the Devil" on the radio. I don't know what it is about that song. When I hear that, it's like up there with Detroit Rock City. When I hear the intro to Detroit Rock City on the radio, as you're just randomly hearing it, there's a level of like adrenaline that flows through my veins. I'm sure you have songs that do that for you, right?
Absolutely.
But I mean, that's the "Running with the Devil" was an absolute fucking game changer. And I try to dissect that. You know, we don't want to get too nerdy on specifics, but all those things in the food chain of his playing. But you know, you can't take Ted Templeton out of that.
Well, that's exactly it. It's good production.
Yeah.
You know, you can instantly identify. But here's the thing. When you have iconic songs like that with iconic players, they've worked on their sound. And each one already they know what they're doing. It's like, you know, you could instantly tell a Zakk Wylde song, or you could tell like a Randy Rhoads song, or you could tell an Eddie Van Halen. And for the most part, that's why Pink Floyd got to keep the name, because it was David Gilmour's guitar sound that you know, made. That's why it's Pink Floyd.
That's right.
So these cats already have their iconic sound, and when you hear that, they know how to get it. You know, they've worked on it. They've worked at getting this, and you know, and over the years, you know, if it changes a little bit, sometimes your albums don't do so well. So you got to go back to that sound. Think of like the later Van Halen. Is later Van Halen as iconic as the early Van Halen to you?
I would say no.
Yeah, exactly. Because now we've introduced little different elements, and
but to your point earlier, like think about how well the public ate up 1984.
Yeah,
the last record with David, with all that synthesizers, and there was a little pushback, I'm sure, from guitar purists, but it didn't affect the sales.
No.
The sales were stratospheric. The tour was stratospheric.
They were great songs on that as well. Every song was a
And then there was the music videos.
Oh
too.
my God, the Hot for Teacher video.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Jump, yeah.
Oh boy, I was just like, I wanted to be cast in that. Like, who can I be?
You know, the Van Halen thing is, I just can't I can't overstate. I can't how that just changed everything. And at that time, I wasn't a guitar player. I can't imagine being a player. My best friend Jim Stewart was a player since we were probably, in diapers. But he just talks about that moment of getting that record, hearing it on DVD, and going to Kmart to buy the record. And it just, as soon as and playing that track over and over again, because nothing sounded like that. After cutting his teeth on Zeppelin and Sabbath and The Who and Pink Floyd and Gary Moore, all good stuff, but there was just something different there, man.
I had my buddies that got me into playing. They had that Van Halen sound down perfect. They had like perfect pitch, perfect everything, and they had all the pedals, and they had it the exact ones that Eddie had, and they had it so dialed in that you would think it was. And they played just like them, the tapping, and then they even took it further than they're using like 8-finger tapping and stuff like that before it was like cool. And but I just remember hearing that and thinking, my God, it was perfect. And it generated interest in me as to, I always say that I'm not an amp guy, I'm not a sound guy or whatever, but it pushed me that much more to want to learn what else I could do with the different pedals and different
gateway or something.
Yeah, it just opened up a whole new world, because I wasn't young. Again, I listened to Hendrix, I listened to Pink Floyd, which I heard all the trippy sounds, but this was Eddie gave like a whole different sound of and things to do, and it's just like, wow, this is pretty amazing.
Being a little younger, did you catch Van Halen like through the 1984, or did you hear that
Totally
stuff?
1984.
So you had to go back and listen to the other stuff.
Yeah,
that's what happened to me too.
Yeah, 1984.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wasn't a Van Halen fan. I was 84.
And there's one of my one of my favorite movies is a movie called Over the Edge. It's like Matt Dillon's first movie, and Van Halen does a cover of "You Really Got Me," and I remember watching that movie super young, being like, "Who is this?" And trying to find that soundtrack, and this is Van Halen. Wait, this is the same Van Halen that sings "Jump" in Panama, but Van Halen, and especially Eddie, like even playing on "Beat It" with Michael Jackson, you heard that guitar solo in there, and you're like, ooh. Now Prince could play that guitar solo
with his eyes closed, with one hand,
right? But Michael needed Eddie, and that was a really great way for Eddie to kind of like get into that, because they were
it helped
Van
build
Halen,
the legend,
because
right?
Van Halen was a rock band, that now they're going into pop.
It helped,
and
pop
that was helping.
And as a human, didn't that always, when you were a kid, make you feel like really cool? Because we were being dictated about genres, right? And it was like, well, do you like rap? Then you can't like rock. Or do you like R&B? You can't like rock, or I like classic rock and I don't like metal. And when you saw like Michael Jackson, probably the most famous person on the planet, but definitely the most famous music person, and then Eddie Van Halen, king of rock, right? Those two guys together. Yes. I just remember feeling this feeling like this is the fucking coolest thing in the world. Life couldn't get any cooler than that. Really?
And let's not forget Wesley Snipes in the video.
Have you guys ever heard like the Gene Simmons produced Van Halen's first album?
I heard that he wanted.
It's called Demos. I have it. I have it.
Yeah, they thank him officially on the first record.
Yeah,
they don't.
I mean, in like all the songs, they sound like Kiss. Like he's
of
Kiss.
Course,
there's definitely a very Kiss influenced in there.
Yeah.
But you can see like Eddie trying to break out of that in that first record. From listening to the demos, and I really, definitely everybody here, like get on YouTube or wherever you can find it.
I want to check that out
and just give it a listen, because it's really, it's familiar. You know what I
Does
mean?
it sound
it's
like Ace's tone? Like, does Eddie's tone sound like Ace on the record?
Yeah, but you know, it's like, you know, when Gene produced Wendy O. Williams.
Yeah.
You know, you hear that it sounds like a Kiss record.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
it's usually the chord. I think it's the chord sound.
Yeah.
The crunch, the chord crunch is unique to Kiss. Yeah, there's something there. I get that.
Yeah.
I know that sound very well.
Yeah. And I thought, you know, and like especially like when I heard that Van Halen produced by Gene, and then I heard the Wendy O. Williams produced by Gene, you can really hear that, you know, his influence in those albums.
Some of the greatest Kiss stuff ever, and I don't know if Fred agrees with this. We talked about it before, but it is to me is the stuff that they didn't produce, like the Paul Stanley produced or Gene Simmons produced records. I mean, you throw Bob Ezrin in front of there, or you throw Toby Wright in front of there. You know, you throw even there was a couple in the late, even the earlier stuff. It's not produced well. I mean, because the production values weren't great what they laid down, but you could hear someone else's interpretation of like their tone. I think it's better sometimes than the actual artist trying to. Isn't that weird? Mm-hmm. That's weird. I think that's for a lot of artists that they need to have that outside.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, look at what like Rick Rubin did.
Oh,
I mean,
what a weird guy, though, man. Successful guy. What a weird guy.
Weird and successful, but like he has that magic touch, and he knows,
regardless of genre.
And it's all in it's the ear. I always say, as a filmmaker, like I was really blessed with a good eye and good ear, so I could visually see what I want to see, and I can hear if something doesn't sound right, and I can be like, okay, let's do that again. I think a good music producer needs to have that really good ear and be able to, you know, dig through the crap and find the gold.
Okay, so we're now like at 85, 86, and things are starting to change a little bit in music. There's this thing called hair metal, which is really starting to compete, or heavy metal, which is real polished and glossy and slick, and whatever you want to call it, hair metal. What was it? There's another name for it. But that was kind of like the answer to the pop stuff that was coming out of MTV. So now you started to have this little bit of divide where people that dug rock were grabbing onto. There's some band named Poison came around. Def Leppard coming out of the early 80s was starting to find their groove. Bon Jovi coming out of the mid 80s. There was this, and it wasn't geographical, but there was a genre there of hair metal. I don't know, it's a terrible thing to say, hair metal, I guess, but you get my point.
Sure.
It was Whitesnake probably helped lead the way into that stuff, right? And then you had some old bands like Kiss trying to grab onto those coattails and swing in that direction.
You can't forget about Motley Crue.
Motley Crue, another one, and they actually, I mean, them and Guns N' Roses, I think, were even beyond hair metal. They were their own thing. They were so successful, but that metal scene was pretty thriving in the late '80s, and MTV certainly helped create that. I mean, Motley Crue needed MTV. I'm sorry, there's not a lot of great musicianship there. They're just they needed MTV.
I thought Shout at the Devil was a great album. I thought, you know, I think once, I don't know, that was probably the only album I ever really listened to by the Crue, because
I get Dr. Feelgood.
Yeah, because I have to admit, once they hit MTV, I was turned off. I didn't like what they were putting out there, like girls, all that stuff. You know what I mean? But I thought Shout at the Devil was a fantastic album that never really got the respect it should have.
Yeah, I think it was an album in the vein of like Dio, and it was just, even like AC/DC to a degree. It was like simple, straight ahead. And it got real glossy after that, I thought. I mean, it was produced, I mean, Dr. Feelgood, the record's produced pretty well. Is that pop rock?
Yeah, I think it is pop rock.
It's pop rock.
Yeah, but my point is the late 80s came to a crashing halt. Because, and this is just a great me, so I apologize for editorializing this, but some guy who apparently listened to some punk records and then decided not to tune his guitar, and somebody with money at some record station or some record company thought that was a cool thing to do and gave him some money, and there you go, Nirvana. That's, I don't, because I have a very specific feeling about that, but I want your feeling. Was Nirvana the end of heavy metal as we knew it at that time? Is that really true? And was at the start of grunge or whatever that is, and what was your interpretation when it was happening, and now as you look back on it, was it really as monumental as it appeared to be when it came?
I have to tell you, man, I was in college when Nevermind came out. Fantastic album. But of course, Teen Spirit was the college anthem, when we were in school. It was at every party. It was just, it was that song. But were they at the end of metal? I don't know. I think they just took it in a different direction. Like you said, grunge. I don't even know how you describe. I mean, I know how you describe it. I don't know how you define it. What exactly is the definition of grunge? I mean, other than music that came out of Seattle, basically by virtually like the same sounding bands. So, I mean, I just think that, Nirvana has its place in music history. I don't think that, musically they were that over the top as far as, wow, they're doing some really amazing stuff here. I mean, they were pretty, like you said, straightforward, easy to latch onto. I think, Cobain definitely had an aura about himself that drove people to him. But, at the end of the day, am I going to sit here and say they should be recognized as one of the greatest bands in music history? I don't think so. They definitely helped a movement, that Seattle movement. I think maybe they were the ones who really drove that. But, were they the end-all be-all? Nah, I don't think so.
Red?
Well, so again, 1990, I was in 8th grade going into my my freshman year of high school. So I was listening to a lot of the hair metal. You had Poison and Faster Pussycat, and, all this stuff. But just like how bell bottoms went out of style and parachute pants came into style, that's what happened with music. And I think it was all part of, what they were feeding us on MTV.
Yeah.
And, there was, punk rock, even during the heyday of like hair metal, punk rock was still going on. There was hip hop was still going on. There's still lots of stuff going on.
Oh, no doubt.
It was just that, okay, well, now there's something new. All right, here's something new that's coming out.
Okay.
And I think that a lot of, people were like, ooh, what is this new sound? I remember, like, I did buy that first Nirvana record, Bleach. So my cousin was in college. She's older than me. She's like, you have to hear this album. This is a band called Nirvana. Here's their album called Bleach. And I'm like, oh my God, this is heavy. And I like heavy guitar. And this was just taking it to that next level. Right. But then you had a band like Soundgarden. And like, I remember the first time hearing Outshined and being like, oh my God, like, what is this? Listen to this guy's voice. I mean, it was...
Right.
Nirvana was one thing. Soundgarden was another. And then all of a sudden you have Pearl Jam, who has even, a different voice, a different, 2 guitar players going on here. It wasn't a 3-piece like Nirvana.
That's a great point.
So, there was just something new and something fresh at that moment. And also at that moment, hip hop rap was right there, right beside it. And you really, like, you can look at it, you can look at, NWA's first album, Ice-T, and then you can look at, Nirvana and be like, wow, these things came out at the same exact time. Right. This is like great shit.
Right.
But if we take a couple steps backwards, the whole thing with Aerosmith and Run DMC, that was a big cultural change because, we loved Aerosmith in the 70s, but then we kind of, they became, cocaine addicts and
drugs,
and they kind of like
felt they
were waning out.
They fell to the side. And, it took Rick Rubin, and those guys, Def Jam and Russell Simmons to be like, hey, like, we love that riff because Rick Rubin's a rock and roll guy.
Yep. Yeah,
So you have Rick
doubt.
Rubin, who's you have Rick Rubin, who's a rock and roll guy, and you have Russell Simmons, who's a hip hop guy. It wasn't even hip hop then; it was rap.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I would say about the '90s bands like Nirvana, the one thing that is lost in all that is the guitar solo. That all went away. Why that happened, I don't know. But
for a short period of time.
Yeah. But that's that was something that I definitely drew from all of that. Let's get back to the guitar solo, man.
Oh, even the Pistols had guitar solos, Fred. They did. I mean, if you want to call them that.
Yeah.
There were Jones did play a guitar solo in those songs. What were your thoughts on the early 90s?
Man, if there was ever a decade that I just lost interest in music, it was the 90s, man. I was just like,
I'm there with you.
Because the thing is again, used to my 60s, 70s, 80s music, and now it was something totally different. There was no guitar solos, or that was minimal, and I was coming into my own as this is what I wanted to do. I started to drift from music, and I was still I was stuck in the 80s, man. Still listening to my stuff. One of the things was, and I'll say it because I didn't dig Nirvana, and it was because at one time we were supposed to open up for Nirvana.
I know.
And then they hit big, and they took us off the bill.
Son of a bitch.
And it was just like, because we were going to play.
There's your internal bias.
But this is what's great is I went to the Experience Museum, the Hendrix Museum out in Seattle, and they had the Nirvana stuff there, and they had Kurt Cobain's handwritten itinerary
playbill,
and Pittsburgh graffiti was on there, and I was just like,
shit.
man, I was supposed to do that, and then they changed the whole thing because they hit big. So I was always like, fuck those guys, I ain't playing. But the thing is I was getting out of playing in bands in the early 90s, so I really I kind of soured on music and tried to concentrate on other things, and it was actually trying to make movies, so I kind of got away from that, and in the middle of the 90s I started to get back into it, but it was like the music that I was listening to then, I was still stuck. I was stuck on Stevie Ray Vaughan and the Black Crowes and shit like that, and discovering like guitar oriented stuff like Satriani, which had been around for a while,
right,
and Eric Johnson. And I think that's where my stuff did. I really didn't start digging music again until I actually went to LA in '99, 2000, and just started. Now I'm in the place that it happened for me, you know what I mean? And so it kind of gave me a rebirth. But for the 90s music, I was keep it. I didn't discover like really Soundgarden until I actually saw Chris Cornell live, like years later. Now here's the thing too, is I was working at Star Lake, so I saw all the bands come through. I saw early, Soundgarden. I saw Pearl Jam. I saw these cats live, at their beginnings. I saw when the Chili Peppers hit and then decided, to go on their fantastic journey to, wow, that doesn't sound anything like the original stuff. So I mean, I've seen the change in it. I just the 90s, I was working in the field, and I just I was indifferent on it. I remember two impactful things for me that didn't bode well from me being open-minded in the 90s. I heard there's MTV had a Headbangers Ball, which I loved in the late 80s. Was it the late 80s it started, I think
so, yeah.
And I remember watching like some really heavy shit, and that wasn't my bag. And Nirvana hadn't really been it either, but I saw the Headbangers Ball, and the Kiss Revenge album came out, which was straight ahead, hard driving rock music that wasn't dark. It was just really in your face, and it was good. Ezrin produced it. Well, I like this. This is good. This is a break from 80s glam. This is really ballsy. And then I saw a video by Pantera, this band called Pantera, and it was not the Cowboys to Hell, the first record, which I thought was a good song, and that was heavy, but it was a little bit melodic.
But this next record by Pantera was angry. I viewed it a song filled with hate, and I had seen it like this real heavy metal had turned into something that was unattractive to me. Like, I could see mosh pits coming. I could see an element of heavy music that I just could not relate to. So I started to I went back and started buying Peter Frampton records, and I started diving into old music again. And the only thing I can honestly say until Fred and I reconnected with the guitar years was that the only band that came out of the 90s which blew me away from the moment I happened to walk through a room with an MTV Music Awards show on and seeing this band was Stone Temple Pilots. When I saw that Scott Weiland was dressed he was in a dress and he smeared lipstick all over his face at the end of the song, and I don't know why I was captivated by that. Some weird thing, I don't know.
You thought he was cute.
I don't, not entirely.
I think I'm pretty,
but I just, but it was just so. But that band is so talented. It reminded me of Van Halen, where you had this, in a way, where you had this amazing lead person who had like this persona. And then you had this really backbone, like one guitar backbone. The guy was faceless,
right?
But he was just there. There was something in that band musically that spoke to me, and every record had a different flavor. And their second record sold more than their first, which the first was a hit, that never happens outside of maybe Zeppelin. And so Stone Temple Pilots were a unique thing in the 90s. To me, that was a band that I actually look back and say, wow, that is something I dug that came out of that decade. But other than that, everything from like some really good bar music and stuff. And what was the big There was the Counting Crows. There was who was the big one?
Dave Matthews.
Darius Rucker. Dave Matthews. Darius Rucker.
Oh, Hootie and the Blowfish.
I mean, there was some big acts there,
right.
and there was what you
the
don't
Gin
like.
Blossoms, yeah.
And then country pop came out of that decade too, right? Garth Brooks, the Country Kiss thing.
Yep.
But for the most part, I was lost because the metal to me, I envisioned unfairly Pantera as being the standard of metal in the 90s, and it wasn't. It was a part of it, but. That just sent me, like you just sent me right back to the oldies.
Yeah, well, that's what I did.
Sent me right back to.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with your age.
I think so.
And
I think
so when I was in high school, okay, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, I was influenced by bands like Rage Against the Machine, like Pantera, like Pantera, like that was just getting heavier. And when you're full of piss and vinegar, that's the kind of music, especially if you...
Good point.
You go from Metallica and like that whole thrash scene, coming out of the late 80s, and then like Metallica becomes, probably the biggest they've ever been
right.
in the 90s.
Thank you, Bob Rock.
The Black Album. But then like bands like Pantera saw that Metallica stuff as like, oh, that's pussy.
Right.
We're going to come at it and we're going to attack it even harder. Rage Against the Machine is,
Right.
I watched a video of Rage Against the Machine playing in college. You can watch this on YouTube. They're kids. They sounded so good.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were just the best of the best. I mean, these guys are really, really great.
No doubt. Morello's a genius, man.
Yeah. So, just... as time goes by, things get heavier. Elvis is not as heavy as the Kinks or the
right.
the Beatles. That's
right.
why everything kind of goes. It keeps us moving and moving and moving. And like, how are we going to shock people? How are we going to do this? Punk rock shock people. You'll have the Sex Pistols. How they shock people? But if we talk about punk for a second. You had the Sex Pistols, who, were this thunderous, true punk band.
For one record.
But then you have a band like the Clash, who becomes a success worldwide. Like those guys were selling out Madison Square Garden.
Right.
Did that help? Did the music video from MTV help that?
Of
course.
Absolutely.
Of course, right?
Of course.
But that put punk into the mainstream, and you started to seeing these different bands.
Although, punk became a thing well after the Pistols were gone.
It became a fashion sense.
Yeah, I mean, punk was not a punk when the Pistols were around for those 2.5 years. They didn't even call it punk. They didn't know what to call it.
Yeah,
right.
And after they were done, punk became a thing. It's really a fascinating study.
Well, there's two mainstream bands that Beastie Boys being one of them that started off as a punk band. Goo Goo Dolls being another one.
Yeah.
You know, why did they make that sellout? I don't know.
Money.
It's all about the money. But I'm glad the Beastie Boys did. They eventually got back to their almost punk roots on the Check Your Head album.
Yeah.
And I think that went over very well with what people wanted to hear at that time. So
Isn't that the ultimate? That's all where all the guesswork is trying to determine what people want to hear at a particular time.
That's
That's
right.
the thing, and sometimes it takes time. Like my favorite Beastie Boys record is Paul's Boutique. Now, when the Beastie Boys
heavy on the samples,
Yeah.
right?
When the Beastie Boys put that album out, people didn't give a shit about it. They wanted "Fight for Your Right to Party" Part 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You know, and now so the Beastie Boys leave New York to to record the second album. They go to L.A. What's in L.A.? Excess, drug. You know, I mean, the skateboard. I mean, these guys had tons of stuff that influenced them, just like all the bands like Black Sabbath. And you think about what they created in Birmingham, and then when they come over and do Black Sabbath 4 and they're doing Blow in California all day long. You know, it's again where you put these artists in these situations to where they're hungry and and how they're being creative, you know, and what's on their plate at that moment in time is really what you get.
There's no doubt.
You know,
and
and
that's great.
You reminded me of
That's a great thought.
It's a great analogy because the Sabbath analogy. There's a film of Sabbath playing the U.S. festival, the US Festival, in the middle of the day. And I think it was 77 or 78.
200,000 people or something.
And they were waning. It had run its course, and Ozzy was on his way out. And there was Sabbath with their balls cut off, playing in bright sunlight with colorful stage, rainbows in the back, rainbows in the back, and they're dressed. There was nothing dark about that experience whatsoever. They were literally, but yeah, it was a reflection of success and money and California sun and probably beaches and blow and. It wasn't. They weren't young, hungry, and angry, and living in a rainy basement in England.
No,
Well, that's what the thing with music. If you listen to like bands when they're up and coming, they're hungry. The production sucks, but they have that raw aggression that translates.
That's why the early material is usually the best.
That's
right.
And
absolutely.
As you get older, you've got money, you've got time, you've got instruments,
Women.
you've got food. Yeah, I mean these cats are like living on somebody's floor, in a basement somewhere, and they're all living together, and they're all starving, eating noodles and noodles, and they don't have the drugs to excess yet. They may drink a lot of beer, but that's what they're drinking. You know what I mean? So you have these angry beer hangovers coming across in your and your music. Whereas, listen to the first Metallica records, listen to the first Megadeth records.
Oh wow!
And listen to the to the production of the final ones. Yeah, one's real angry, and then toward the end, it's all slick production, and. Even if you listen to the old Sabbath, some of these records are like recorded in a day.
Yeah,
the whole thing done in a day.
So great, though. Isn't it?
But
That's
youth is a huge thing.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like youth is a huge thing.
I mean, I think we don't want to admit that our
Of course we do. If you look at my movies from when I made my first
Great
movie at
example.
24
Great
to the movie that
example.
I made at 44.
Great example.
You know what I mean? People are like, "Oh my God, did Fred get soft?" No, Fred didn't get soft. Fred just got older and wanted to tell different stories because he has more life experience.
Right. Exactly. And artists writing songs, same thing.
Oh my God,
Even performing too. It's like I could. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. But I remember seeing Bruce Springsteen in like the early '90s, and not being that impressed with like. The stories of him running around like a madman. There was still some of that, but I didn't get enough of it. And my buddy next to me was a little bit older than me. He's like, dude, he's in his 40s now.
Yep.
He's not in his 20s. That matters. And I always kept that and it hasn't always been easy to film Kiss shows for me or photograph them in my guitar years because I have high expectations for that band in my brain because of what I lived. Even the non-makeup years. So seeing Paul Stanley not running around like crazy, kind of lumbering along, and little spurts of movement here and there, it's an adjustment because it's just not what you were photographing, and seeing a lot of bad angles from these guys, the unflattering photos, because they're just aged. That's life.
Yep.
It's we don't want to admit that, but that's reality.
I saw Pearl Jam in 1991. Eddie Vedder climbing the scaffolding at Lollapalooza, and then I saw Eddie Vedder in 2012, where he just stood there and sang like a singer.
Yeah,
it's the same guy.
Yep.
Making the same music. It's just you have different priorities now. You know what I mean? It's easy. You can't do that stuff. When you're so young and hungry.
So right. You're so
jumping
right.
off the PA stacks.
Oh my God!
Climbing the lighting truss.
When was the last time you guys jumped off a 3-foot porch? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't happen.
I can't even jump off the tailgate of a truck now. It's just like,
I know.
Bon Jovi's first couple tours in high-heeled cowboy boots, he would jump over the drum riser and land. That's how they opened when they were opening for other acts. I saw him open for Rat, blew Rat off the stage.
I remember that. I was at that show.
But he jumped over the drum riser and landed choreographed in these boots, similar to what Prince would do.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, once Success hit, he wasn't doing that shit anymore. You know what I mean? There's no freaking way, man. So let me turn the corner a little bit here. Fred, I know you don't play guitar, but you're certainly well versed in what you dig. We also have 3 guitar players here. Me being the weakest of the 3.
I'm a bass player.
Yeah, but
that's not true. I'm probably the weakest of
Fred's a bass player, Mr. Kowalo, which means basically he's a frustrated guitar player.
Yeah, pretty much. Less strings.
Okay, all right. We're gonna go down the age-old bar talk. Sitting around a bar, drinking a beer, and having an argument with your buddy when the jukebox comes in because you hear a Zeppelin song, and some guy goes, "Jimmy Page is the greatest guitar player ever."
Nope.
And you're sitting there saying, "No, can't be. Richie Blackmore's the greatest player ever." And some guy goes, "No, Hendrix is the best ever." Okay, so we're going to do that right now. I'm going last. Mr. Vogel, if you had to do it, as difficult as it is, it's a very difficult question, especially for someone who loves music. You can use the premise most influential, most skilled, coolest sound, whatever the analogy is, but who do you place at the top when you think of rock guitarists?
I'm a Hendrix guy. Jimmy. So in my household, my stepfather listened to the Grateful Dead, so I grew up with the Grateful Dead constantly. So I was listening to a lot of that kind of music, and I remember hearing Purple Haze on something that he had on a tape, and being like, "Oh my God, what is this?" And just hearing that, and then becoming a student of Hendrix, like, not because I can't play it, but I can watch it and I can listen to it, and I just watching his hands and just a way that he could play a lead and a rhythm all at the same time, because he's just a madman. The stuff that the Experience did with just 3 people was just mind blowing to me. So I'm gonna say Jimi Hendrix is my number 1.
Okay, who would you stack 2 and 3?
Terry Kath from Chicago.
Interesting choice. Why?
Just because I think he was just really brilliant. And I think you have this thunderous guitar, which he really was in those early Chicago records, mixed with that horn section. I mean, I just think it was
so the whole song composition,
music magic right there.
Okay.
Number 3, Eddie Van Halen.
Huh. Okay. I think and based on your age, I can understand the impact of that.
Yep. That, Frankenstein guitar. I love Frankenstein, for one.
I see the analogy.
And, watching him innovate where, Hendrix can do, pick with his teeth and make sounds come out of guitar that I've never heard before. Eddie Van Halen was doing these finger tappings and stretching out chords that I was waiting for strings to break, that whole guitar to break.
Right on.
And
they do,
again,
don't they, Fred?
Again, very different. You know, all three of those guys are very different guitar players, but I
No
think
doubt.
you know
No
they,
doubt. No
you know,
doubt.
when they want to get thunderous, they can.
That is a good take. That's unexpected. That's a good take. All right, Mr. Waz.
Yeah, you know,
It's a hard question.
yeah, it is a hard question because it's hard to just narrow it down to three guys. I love elements of so many different guitar players. I mean, I love Buddy Guy. You know, Buddy Guy can, you know, his way of playing a blues solo to me is I don't know, I could feel it. You know, put it that way. But if I'm talking about Jimmy Page, I mean, the thing that I love about Jimmy Page is, again, he could take a blues song and really make it his own almost on the guitar. There's a song like 10 Years Gone, where, you know, Mr. Page gives us a lesson in the major seven chords, and you know, it's like, wow, is this the guy that I really expected to give me this sound on this particular so from that standpoint, I think, you know, he probably is my favorite.
Okay.
I take a look at a guy like Larry Carlton, Steely Dan. You know, the solo he plays in like Kid Charlemagne.
To me, that's the greatest guitar solo ever.
Every sound guy uses that to warm up a PA.
You know, even beyond the tone, it's the note selection.
Absolutely, absolutely, and phrasing, and it's you know, how many times do we hear a song in you know, in D, C, and G or something of that nature, but it's the phrasing, it's the way a guy actually puts it out to an audience, to your ear, that makes those three notes special. The third guy, I'd even have to go with a guy like Lifeson. Alex Lifeson. I mean, some of the stuff that he delves into, that band, that three-man band, the sound that those three guys produce. I mean, we're talking about probably the greatest drummer in rock history.
There's no probably about it. Fred will disagree, but I'm telling you, there's no probably about it.
Probably the finest bassist in rock history.
He's up there.
And then Lifeson is
He
right
said
there
every
with
note.
those guys. Yeah. Lifeson's right there with those guys. And to go through a 20-minute odyssey on a guitar like Necromancer or
Deep Cut
2112. I mean, it's you know, that's amazing to me.
That boy smoked a lot of dope between 74 and 76.
No doubt.
Like always 79 maybe. Yeah, no, I that's a good take. That's a good take. So you have Jimmy at the forefront. You have Larry Carlton too, and you have, now see, Larry Carlton's almost a cheat for our conversation because I could go down I'm a jazz guy too, so let's leave jazz out of it. So you can't. Larry's disqualified for this conversation.
Okay.
So you have Lifeson, Page. So who would be is Page in that circumstance? Is Lifeson number 2 or is Lifeson number 3?
Well, if in that case, I'd probably have to put, you know, Hendrix second and Lifeson third.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh, that's a good take too.
Yeah, Hendrix. I mean, the way he would play rhythm guitar, you already touched on it. He would play rhythm and leads at the same time, and it's like, wow, how do you get your hands to work that way? And just the way he would, you know, drop that thumb over the E string and play basically a whole bar chord with only, you know, a couple of fingers.
Well, that move's been very. I mean, that's been very. He's inspired so many players to play that way.
Right.
He did it first. I think.
I'd throw my thumb over.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't because I can't. But
Hendrix had those hands that strangled that neck.
Right.
You know.
it helps. I mean, genetics. It's like sports. Genetics.
No, exactly what
genetics can help.
it is.
All right, Sir Kowalo.
This is
It's got to be hard for you.
This is easy for me. 3 most influential guitar players.
Well, no, I mean, no.
Wait. C.C. DeVille, Mick Mars, and Kurt Cobain. By far. the most influential.
It's a tough question. Is this influential? Was it your favorite? Is it?
So,
I mean, it's whatever you want it to be.
Well, what's funny is I touched on it earlier, and I stick to my guys. Again, Stevie Ray Vaughan was an amazing player. And in the 90s thing, to go back to that question, that's what I filled my 90s with. I was just, I just didn't dig the 80s music, but that's when I discovered, like I said, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Johnson and those cats kind of players. And my 90s that's what I learned to play, the Stevie Ray Vaughan blues kind of thing. But so he's always been up there for me. Of course, Hendrix as well. But as for to sit down and watch cats actually play, who can play like all styles of music, there's two guys that you really probably wouldn't think of them on the list, but one of them is Zach Wild, because
I get it,
spending all those years with him, but actually seeing what the guy can do
on the bus.
He can play every style of music there is, and he can play it proficiently. And then he'll say, "Watch me transpose this to the piano," and then he'll play it on the piano, and it's just. But so as an overall musician, it's great. And the cat has written some memorable stuff, right? You know what I mean? And but he's a lot more. But the absolute blow my mind. Greg, glad I know the guy. I love to watch him anytime I can. Is John Lowry? Is John 5, who can play anything. And when I mean anything, he's played with he's Rob Zombie.
Well, just buy one of his solo albums. There's all kinds
exactly.
There's all kinds of
and you
variety
can hear, like Sugarfoot Rag on there, and then he goes into some drop tune thing, or Behind the Nut Love. The cat's an all around player, and he's like he's lesser known. You know what I mean? But to actually sit down and watch these guys, they're my favorites.
I'm so glad you said John 5, because I had him in mind when you brought it up. We're talking earlier, and I actually had the pleasure to see him play live at the Hard Rock.
Yeah, you went down to Hard Rock?
Yeah,
I saw him.
And wow, it was so kick ass. Like, this guy plays country
from another planet, man.
Yeah. He'll, like you said, he'll do some ragtime stuff, and then he goes into this whole medley of cover tunes. Like at the end of it, he blew me away. Yeah, so I'm glad you actually brought him up.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's a good friend, but when I can sit and watch that cat any day, and he's humble. You know what I mean? And but those are looking back. I had like my early influences, but as I got older, I saw John. I'm like, I just might as well hang it up now, because I'm never going to be able to do that, And these cats make it look effortless. Yeah. And then you get into Zappa. I mean, I saw Zappa live, and just the musical choice of notes. He wasn't like a super player, but the arrangement, the things that these guys could do.
Right.
I've seen Vi live as well, and it's Vi. And you want to get into Megadeth. Dave's one of the, I hate to say it, I will say it, he's amazing at his control and the riffs that he writes. And this is a guy that can have a conversation with you playing like Holy Wars, and he's sitting there having a full conversation. Hey, look, after the show, can I get my sandwich? Make it a roast beef sandwich with lettuce and tomato. No, hold the tomato. And he's still playing the riff, and his mind's, and it's perfect. He's like, and he's sitting there telling you. So anyway, the other day I was shopping, and I saw this, and you're going, how the hell is this guy? So there's, but it's a hard thing to pull it down to just three, but Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan are up there, and I'm gonna say it's a toss up. It's a toss up between Zach and John 5 for me.
Okay.
And Zombie just put out a new album, didn't he?
Yeah, he just I haven't listened to it yet.
I haven't either.
I haven't heard it yet. I haven't heard it yet.
But John's a huge Kiss fan.
Oh, he's a huge Kiss fan.
There's a video of him playing one of Paul's Ibanez Iceman's on. He's like geeking out.
You know, the thing that kills me about John 5 too is, and I'm sure he's got all custom made stuff, but he gets those killer tones out of that Telecaster.
Yeah.
Like, wow, man, this guy's playing thrash metal like stuff on a Telecaster.
And anyone that plays guitar knows the following: you have to extract the tone out of any Telecaster.
Right, exactly.
It's not butter in your hands. Some people make it look that way, but you got to extract that tone out of it.
Yeah, even Prince played one, and you know,
he played like
cut
a
his teeth
honer.
on one. Yeah,
it was like a beginner level Telly. It was a honer.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so, and John gets his done stuff. Ken Myers makes his stuff out of Florida, and then Fender, of course, puts out some stuff. But John's like custom little light up and little lava lamps and shit like that. My buddy Ken Myers makes them out of Florida, and you know, to get that tone and playability out of a Telly is pretty.
It's impressive.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so it's such a hard question because listen to the answers you gave. Realize that it's almost an impossible question to ask because there's most influential, there's who I prefer. So I'm going to give you two quick lists. The most influential rock guitarist. I'm going to say rock and roll rock guitarist. I have to put, for my ears, I have to put Page up there. All things considered, because yes, he was part of the composition of Zeppelin, but not too much because John Paul Jones had a tremendous amount of the composition of that band. Page really kind of keyed on the guitars, and there was lots of them, layers of them, alternate tunings. It also, whether it was inadvertent or whether it was intentional, he created his own tone. You heard a Zeppelin song, for the most part of that catalog, even from all of My Love all the way back to Good Times, Bad Times, and everything in between. It was Zeppelin. You could tell that was Zeppelin. There's a lot of variety in there, but a moment so on the third album with all the acoustic stuff.
Right.
Friends being the one song, but then seeing how instrumental he was, in my opinion, on launching a whole nother brand of metal, which became Iron Maiden, and that brand of metal with the song Achilles' Last Stand, which was so light years ahead of anything at that time. There wouldn't be an Iron Maiden if it wasn't for that song. Right. It was just, in seeing all that composition. But then the kicker for me was seeing him live. My only time up close, which was with the Crows. I had front row seats, dead center for him and the Crows, and I watched Jimmy the entire night. That was my whole. I was fixated on him, and even at that advanced age, it was just something. It was just royalty. It was guitar royalty at its absolute finest. He was slobbering and sloppy and behind the beat often, which is an art. So Keith Richards made a career out of playing behind the beat.
It's true.
Page is a little late on delivery at times too, but I think it's intentional. That's magic to me.
Yeah.
But below him, there's all these other people. It's hard, man. I'm a big Pete Townsend fan. I think Pete's more about composition, because the Who is a package, right? But early Who is really some heavy guitar riffs, man. And I think that his impact is really substantial. So I'm going to put him third. And when I talk about influential rock guitarist, although the skill set is not a Page, probably not a Townsend or many other skilled players, but the influence of Tony Iommi and what he meant to what rock became.
Absolutely.
The godfather of the riff, all that stuff. And for what I want to hear, for the music that I dig, whether it's dark or light or the shading of it all, right? Iommi is like, I keep going back to that. The combination of delivering the rhythm at the same time, like then peeling off into these really... I mean, when I heard the flattened fifth for the first time on the song Black Sabbath, it was, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And yes, it's a function of mathematics and music that goes back, I guess you could be put in jail or stoned in the medieval era for playing the flattened fifth. But he had the balls to play it in a heavy metal song, and which is right up your alley. It's just something that just, it raises the dead almost, right? But to hear that as a kid, and then just because I think Ozzy had a unique voice, but I think you could have put any vocalist there, and I think Sabbath would have made it. I think it was so
Dio,
unique and different.
yeah.
You know, it was so well. Could have any other vocalist got them to Dio? That's the question.
Yeah.
You know, but I would say those, and there's a bunch of others, Blackmore and all that. Now, when it comes to favorite guitar players, people that who I think. It's impossible to say who's the best, right? Because if you go on YouTube now, there's some girl in Cambodia that's got like a $45 guitar that's playing scales like this. So best is real subjective now, right?
Right.
I mean, so to me, in terms of performances, Fred knows this is where I'm going to go, but I think Al Di Meola is the greatest living guitar player when I take all in consideration the kind of modes and scales that my ears like to hear, the dexterity, the staccato picking, the fire and the fury and the passion. And when he plays that stuff, when you see him live, when I hear that on, he's up there. And like in terms of what I love, my favorites, Pat Metheny, same era, different style, more atmospheric, but maybe more composition there. But still, to watch him play acoustic and translate those songs into acoustic, just incredible. And I come back to Larry Carlton. Those three are my favorite, and they're all kind of jazz guys. But the impact they leave to the sense you get from what comes out of those strings with them is so. It's different than rock. It blends, but it's different. But it's impossible to put those three in with Jimmy Page and Tony Iommi.
Right.
It's just impossible. But in terms of what I love, what moves me, those guys are just titans, man. They're just titans.
Agreed.
I mean, you can't. I mean, whether you like Di Meola or not, it's his fire. I mean, Zakk Wylde would not be Zakk Wylde if Al Di Meola had not come before him. Right?
Al's a big. Zach is
a lot of metal players. I think
Zach is a big fan of Al Di Meola. He talks about it all the time. Maybe that's his go-to. I mean, he loves Di Meola.
Well, I think fast guitar. I think there was some fast electric guitar in the '70s, but not like it is today. I think fast guitar was ushered in by Di Meola playing electric with Return to Forever and Chick Corea and that fusion stuff. Because there's probably a shit ton of fusion players that we can't even talk about because we probably don't even know that we're burning people to the dirt in the '70s, right?
Right.
I mean, there's just so much good stuff out there. All right, so in terms of bands coming out of, let's just say, the origin of rock and roll, obviously you're going to probably mention Elvis, but in terms of bands, heavy metal bands, rock bands, just rock bands in general, it's a tough call. I know. Maybe a little easier than picking a guitarist, but your top three rock and roll bands.
Top three rock and roll bands.
See, we can come back to if you.
Well, no, because I mean, this is
okay.
What's the right answer?
Check us out.
Yeah,
check us out. I'll give you two caveats. You can have two lists.
You're on a desert island.
You can have two lists. No, two lists. The most important rock and roll bands. And I don't. You can leave Elvis in the '50s out of it. Let's say from the '60s on, and then your three favorite rock and roll bands. Okay, how's that? So 3 and 3.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna go with the Beatles.
Okay,
and George Harrison wasn't no schlub on a guitar.
Yeah, he's
not at all.
I think he's one of the greats too. He's definitely on my top 10.
Okay, this is for top 3 rock bands.
Top 3 rock bands.
Okay.
The Beatles.
Not your favorite. You can do your favorites separately. And if they are your same, that's fine. But most influential bands.
Most influential bands.
Most important bands.
Most important bands.
Right.
The Beatles.
Okay.
Start to finish, from their poppy stuff to their psychedelic stuff.
Yeah, right on.
You can listen to anything, anytime.
Right on.
Black Sabbath. And I'm gonna have to go with the Jimi Hendrix Experience. I know their little time capsule wasn't very long, but what they put out, I can listen to that all day long.
I get it. You?
I'd have to say the Stones. Just that whole British invasion thing. I mean, they were kind of like the first ones to really cross the pond and kind of throw down our throats the blues that they figured out how to play.
The Beatles had some blues in their music, certainly,
right.
But they weren't. They were different than the blues.
No, they were definitely more towards the pop side of the blues.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Where the Stones was into like Muddy Waters, the Beatles were
Right
into
on.
Little Richard.
Right on. Great analogy.
Right. No better video than the Stones and Muddy Waters playing live together at the Checkerboard Lounge in Chicago.
I've seen that.
That's awesome.
Seen that.
Fantastic. Those guys are just sitting around drinking fifths of Jack all night.
Yeah. Oh man.
I'd have to say influential again. Deep Purple. I mean, I think they kind of started the whole metal scene.
Do you?
I think they were definitely influential in that.
'Cause that argument happens a lot. I mean, because people leave Zeppelin out of the metal thing, and they put Deep Purple and Sabbath. Like those two, like which one of those two kind of started it?
Right.
You know.
Some people say Blue Cheer started it.
Yeah, I've heard that argument made too. Yeah.
But they didn't get the notoriety that those
No,
other
that's why
bands
they're
did.
probably not in the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm
But
not
period,
saying it's
but-
fair, but just they didn't click beyond their initial creation.
The MC5. They were heavy.
And then of course, Zeppelin's there too, as far as game changers. I mean, what really haven't they done?
How influential was Zeppelin? Like I think, like I mentioned, Achilles' Last Stand, I think ushered in a certain style of metal. With that particular song. I could be full of shit too. Maybe they didn't. But how influential? Because that argument's made a lot. Like they weren't that influential to a lot of people. They were their own like iceberg. But once it died, because the argument is made that once Bonham passed and they didn't continue, the Plant stuff wasn't anything. Well, I think it kind of was that time, but it wasn't like Zeppelin, and Jimmy Page's unique small solo projects weren't Zeppelin-ish.
Right.
So nothing's out. It took what 30 years before Greta Van Fleet came,
Yeah.
and showed us something like it, but there wasn't anything. So were they really that quote unquote influential, or were they? I don't know.
I mean, if we're talking about like radio play and what did people expect to hear back then, I think that they kind of turned that world upside down, because like you were alluding to earlier, we went from AM radio with the yacht rock type of stuff, and then next thing you know, here comes this band that's really just kind of like, wow, where the hell did that come from? And so I guess that's kind of how I'm attacking it.
Got it.
Just from that standpoint, they just kind of turned the music world upside down. And
Well, I think so. I remember 20 years ago going to a family member, and they had albums. Let's put these on, and I put the first Zeppelin album on an album, on a vinyl. I heard Good Times, Bad Times, and I said, wow, could you imagine being like in 1969 after hearing like the Beatles to that point and the Stones kind of to that point, and then to hear that fucking guitar riff. I mean, like, what the fuck is that, right? Because really, I mean, it was something. It was a force.
or how about Dazed and Confused, where they're now jamming for 10, 12 minutes,
Right.
and
20 minutes.
yeah, and it's like, wow, we never really heard that before.
Yeah. I get it. So maybe, yeah. Can we separate the concept of influential versus iconic? There are those two different words. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I know, like, I remember the first time I heard Led Zeppelin, and I'm sure you guys probably know the first time you heard it. But there's a lot of bands out there that I can't tell you the first time that I heard it. But Led Zeppelin.
That's a good point.
I
That's a
remember
good point.
I was at a sleepover, and I was in 6th grade, and I walked past my friend's older brother's room, and I heard Black Dog for the first time.
Yeah.
And I made him play it 4 times in a row.
See?
I never heard anything like it.
Yeah,
and
isn't
it
that
was-
cool? That's the power of music.
That's
man.
it.
It's
and
crazy.
that was it. And
It's
I still,
crazy.
and I tell the story whenever I run into him. I always like try to bring up that story because I just remember, like, dude, your brother turned me on to Led Zeppelin.
Fred.
Beatles over the Stones for sure for the 60s.
Okay. hard.
Sabbath and Zeppelin for the 70s. We'll give it that. It's like
Okay.
the heydays were there. Motley Crue for the 80s.
Just Motley Crue.
Yeah, you know what? They changed. They came in.
I think Guns N' Roses was a thing.
Well, Guns N' Roses was late 80s, but and that album is fantastic. But there wouldn't have been anything. You know, in all honesty, the Motley Crue kind of started that L.A. They were the big of the big of that L.A. scene, and you know,
Quiet Riot too, right?
Yeah,
Randy
but they
Quiet
didn't
Riot.
have the success.
No, it didn't.
That Motley did, or the longevity. And then Guns N' Roses in the late '80s with Appetite for Destruction, which I believe became the biggest selling debut album of all time. Everything on that's great. And then they really catapulted, you know, with Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 in the early '90s. It was like '91 or something like that. But you know, and for the '90s. Again, Nirvana, you know, brought all that. They were like the influential thing. So there's 4 there, but I try to do it by decade. So I picked one from each decade.
I get it. I mean, to me, I think I don't care for the band much. Never got much out of it. The Beatles, never. But I recognize how influential they were, and definitely more influential than the Stones. I think. I mean, the Stones being straight ahead rock and roll did. You know, I'm sure bands, you know, were influenced by the Stones, certainly, but not to the degree that the Beatles were, because the Beatles influenced metal, influenced rock, influenced other genre pop, because I think it was the melodic structure in a lot of their songs, and then some of the weird things they were doing were picked and chosen by people. I don't know how influential this band is, but they certainly were big, and that's the Eagles. I mean, they seem to get left out of the conversation a lot.
It's true.
But
They're kind of like a super group.
Yeah,
You know what I
they
mean?
were like a super group. So did they qualify or not?
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. Did they qualify in the conversation?
Because I remember when I first discovered that, you know, like Glenn Fry and, you know, some of those guys were like Linda Ronstadt's like backup band. Being like, well, you know, because she was the most popular singer, and again, like that that '70s era right there, where
For
you know
a period
that
of
really
time.
light music.
No doubt.
But man, Joe Walsh,
Yeah.
put Joe Walsh into the fold. Another great guitar player, guys.
There's no doubt. He was a. I think Walsh, from Eagles purists, a lot of them don't want to admit Walsh's contribution to the band. But how can you not? From my ears, I mean, you can't dismiss Joe.
No.
Even the James Gang stuff.
Oh,
Was
I love
just
the James
brilliant.
Gang.
Yeah.
Funk 49. What
Yes.
times we play that in Boogie Street?
Oh,
That was
I
like
know.
it was our go-to, man.
Yeah.
Every Saturday morning.
That used to be. That was a sound check song for a long time for me. Played at sound check. That's how I checked the guitars.
Man, Deep Purple was like such a heavy one for me too, because the reason I won't pick Deep Purple, I think I want to explain this, is because the body of work is not that big. I do not minimize the impact of Machine Head, man. You can't.
Right.
But the body of work, Zeppelin's body of work isn't that great either. Like in terms of really long. But is that argument over? Let me ask you this before I answer. Is that argument overstated because we talk about body of work? Well, a lot of great bands coming out of the 70s and through the mid 80s, when you got to the late 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, the stuff they have put out sporadically, it hasn't been that fucking good. We keep going back to that initial stuff. You know, so when we talk about bands not having a long, big catalog, how much of that catalog do we really want to even consider in their legacy?
Right.
As being impactful.
Like a band like Chicago. Like, I totally just disregard their 80s stuff.
Do you really? All of it?
Not all of it.
Okay.
There was they had their moments, but you know, the Peter Cetera thing, and I'm like, can we just get back to 25 or 60?
Well, let's talk about that for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because I got an opinion on that too. So
I do too.
You don't like the Peter Cetera era of Chicago.
It was what it was. I just don't prefer it.
Okay.
I'm more of a beginnings guy. I mean, I love you know, Saturday in the Park, you know, that whole thing. But yeah, when they came out with the 80s stuff, I just really thought they were just trying to be too commercial, and you know, they had an audience that, you know, they had their place in the 80s, I guess.
Okay.
For what, you know, for what it was in the 80s, but this wasn't my thing.
Okay.
I definitely preferred some older stuff.
Well, Losing Kath was it was
That's it.
and I think that's where the dividing line for a lot of fans were. You know, but Peter Cetera had shown the strength of his work to me on "Wishing You Were Here" is one of the greatest songs ever, because both of them.
I love that song,
and it's like, it's almost like if you really want to, you know, we used to get high and debate this. This is what Wade Nolte, my good friend Wade Nolte, shout out to Wade. We used to get high and debate the following: was that song the handoff from Terry to Peter? Was, you know what I mean? Like, did God enable that masterpiece of a song? Because I believe it's a masterpiece of a song.
I think it is.
Yeah, beautiful song.
And I was really in. I mean, I liked Terry Kath a lot. I liked Chicago, but hearing Cetera's voice on that, the way that song is structured was just beautiful. I love that. It gives me chills when I listen to it. But was that the song that kind of forebode the handoff that was going to take place in that band?
More,
you know
likely,
what I mean?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, but so that argument goes out a lot. But I like them both, and there are some poppy songs from Chicago in the '80s. Not a lot, but there are some that I think are fucking pretty good. I mean, like
Stay the Night.
Yeah,
Come
they
on,
were.
And that had some. Yeah, that was a great song and had some guitar in it. I mean, you know,
Actually, I like that video.
it's kind of well, every red-blooded American guy likes that video. But yeah, I mean, I can't dismiss the Cetera era. There are some really well-written, and the thing about that gets lost oftentimes talking about producers. David Foster wrote a lot of
That's
stuff.
it. David Foster.
David Foster's a mother, man.
Yeah.
He was the mastermind behind all that Cetera stuff.
Yeah. Did he have any impact on Chicago before when Kath was around?
No.
It was just a Cetera collaboration.
It was more Terry Kath. He was really, the backbone of Chicago.
Yes, I mean it's what a band though, and they seem to always get left out of the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, they were the house band at the Whiskey.
I did not know that.
Wait, what?
Yeah, they were the house band at the Whiskey, and
I didn't know that.
You know, Jimi Hendrix even said that Terry Kath was like his favorite guitar player.
Wow.
Oh wow.
No shit.
Yeah. So right after Chicago Transit Authority, my favorite Chicago record is Chicago No. 2, and Walk in the Country is my favorite Chicago song of all time. Because it's got
Deeper cut.
It's got that really crunchy guitar in there, and the breakdown. Oh my God, like that song moves me emotionally. Like when I hear it,
I get it.
You know?
I totally get it. When you, I know I'm avoiding answering the question, but I got great questions here. When you hear older songs that are not produced that well. We sit and argue, what if this had been done like today? Could you imagine, like, if, I used to say it about Kiss records, man, I wish Kiss Live or Kiss, Kiss and Death Dressed to Kill and Holiday Hall, I wish they were done in today's production, but I've shaped my belief now that when I hear like the first 3 Rush records and I hear that dated production, even a little bit of hiss, whatever, you put it on a good stereo system and you back off the tone and you just kick back and you listen to that. There's something beautiful about that analog tape, original mastered recording that, although it's not anywhere near sonic or perfect, it's fucking beautiful.
Yes. It's the way it was meant to be heard. Honestly, I mean, the advent of the CD, I mean, we lost a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than the sound of when that needle hits that vinyl record and you hear those pops. I mean, that to me is like, all right, we're in for it. We're in for a trip here. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for that.
And and I'm a huge 50s fan, so I love, like, you listen to like Buddy Holly and the Crickets.
Oh, yeah.
Bo Diddley, just the way those songs sound, it's like recorded in a tin can, but I love it so much, and it just it has like an aura. Yeah, it has an aura around it, and I would never change it for the world. That's how I want to hear those songs.
One of the funny things is now that when I started playing again, I went out and I started jamming with this rockabilly guy. So now, I mean, I dug the Stray Cats, of course, but now I'm like digging deeper into, different stuff that I never would thought I'd play, and it's just
Roy Orbison.
Yeah, and you're getting into some stuff, and it's just like, wow, these songs I've heard them, but to listen to the how they recorded, you know, because I listen to a song and I try to figure it out,
Right.
And it's just like, wow, man, these are pretty cool, and they're structured way different than you'd expect, but there's a lot going on. But you listen to the recording quality, and it's just like, this is pretty cool. When you think about that, when you think about it, you know, it's like a 2-track or a 4-track, and then how they did it, and it's just like, wow, this is pretty intense, man, to get a group of guys to make music like this.
I mean, think about how influential Les Paul was.
Oh, yeah.
And just the multi-track that he laid. I mean, people think about the guitar. The guitar is one thing. The guitars there was already guitars. Leo Fender was proving that. I mean, he was cool. I mean, I love the Les Paul. That's my gig. But I mean, it's that multi-track recording.
Yeah.
You know, it's and again, a little audio hiss isn't bad.
Right.
I had to get there mentally, because I went through the 80s with the rest of us. Oh my God, CD sounds so good. And then Rush started doing DDD recordings. Remember, all digital recordings, and there was no hiss? I'm thinking, well, all things should be. So we kind of like gear up that, you know, we're expecting excellence. And in reality, it's the beauty of what those early, because Zeppelin records sound like they're recorded like shit. The early ones, especially, right? They're backed off. They're not real big sounding. But now, when you EQ it right and you put it on a good stereo, I put those on my Bose 901s and I EQ it right, and I really sit there and listen to that. Spatially, it's fucking amazing.
No, it's true, because I bought an original first pressing of the first Leonard Skinner album, and the only way that I've heard those songs before were on CD. And hearing that record on my record player, on my 1988 Kenwood record player,
to that, man,
blew my mind. I'm like, what? Is this the same song? Like, just hearing this, you know, the warmth of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is a fallacy, because what we were told, I think. Tell me if you heard something similar. I was told in the 80s that CDs were going to be great, and this whole bullshit about, you know, you can hear warmth in the analog and all this. CDs have an oversampling rate now that you can't hear the space in between. There's no difference. I was told that so many times until I started listening to CDs in my car, then bringing them home, listening to them at home, and then comparing it to the vinyl. And it was a world of difference. Not with every recording, but with a lot of them. Right. And like, I don't give a shit what an engineer says. I just don't give a shit. There is a tinny, I can pronounce it, a tinny sound to any digital recording compared to the warmth. And I'm not romanticizing about the era. I can fucking hear it, man.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying I want to start recording on tape or anything. I'm just saying, from a convenience standpoint, it's not practical. But fuck, I can hear it. I mean, now it's funny, the kids are buying albums today, and it's not an album experience. These new albums that are being pressed for these modern records, it was recorded digitally,
right? And
they're now laying it down on a vinyl format. That's not an audio recording. You know, you did it right. You got the original first press from the master tape put on. That's an all analog experience.
Yeah, and there's you know, I do a thing called Fred's Record of the Day.
Yes.
Yeah. And
it took us this long to mention that in this podcast.
And you know, my goal is to turn people on to vinyl, and the sound of records, and what's good and what's not good, and you know, I try to keep it very simple, and I want people just to.
Dude, a lot of people dig that, man.
Yeah, just, you know, I never heard this before. I just put up. There's a Mongolian metal band called the Who. HU.
He's talked about that, I think.
Yeah, I've met him.
Yeah, and you know, I saw them at Riot Fest 2 years ago. I thought they were amazing, and you know, I got so many people complimenting, like, "Dude, I've never heard this," and I just saw your record of the day, and
that's the beauty of music.
That's it. And, you know, because that's, you know,
they're awesome.
That's what music is. It is that shared experience. It is that first time, you know, walking past a bedroom and hearing something, and that guy taking the time to play, you know, Black Dog 4 times for me, or whatever. You know, so I mean, that's why I think, you know, music is such an important piece, and I think artists find that importance too. So my record of the day the other day was Otis Redding, and Otis covers Satisfaction. Otis cover, you know, there's probably 3 different covers on that record, and I love when older bands, like, you know, like an Otis Redding covers a song like Satisfaction,
right?
You know, and you hear that. you know, or Elvis covering the Righteous Brothers, or even Hey Jude from the Beatles, or whatever. You know, it's awesome to hear like somebody of that caliber,
No question.
covering somebody.
No
You
question.
know?
Well, it's definitely flattering to that newer artist when an older artist covers.
So here's a question for all you guys. Sorry
Yeah.
to take your spot here, sir. But
You can sit up here if you want.
Let's,
I'm fine with that.
what's your favorite cover?
It's a great question. Why you guys look at me first?
Well, we're gonna start this way now. Eric.
Yeah, that's that's perfect.
Oh man, that is tough. I didn't know what a cover record was until Kiss put "Any Way You Want It" by Dave Clark 5 on the back of Alive 2, right there. I didn't know what a cover was. My mother's like jamming out to it in the kitchen. I'm like, wait, my mom's jamming out the Kiss. This isn't cool. I didn't know that the Kinks sang those couple songs that
Really
Van
got me.
Halen was cracking in the early '80s until my parents told me that's not whatever whatever band that is. That's the Kinks. So that was my first like realizing that a rock band can take a cool song from the '50s or whatever and really kill it. Man, that's a really crazy out there question, man. I mean, You Really Got Me by the Kinks has got to be up there for me because it was like so raw, like Eddie's version. And then you listen to the Kinks version, that made me not a Kinks fan because my expectations were that sounds just so weak compared to, you know, but that was production and everything else. So I would say You Really Got Me by the Kinks, done by Van Halen. Was it?
I take it into the 90s. I love a band called Cake.
Yeah.
When they redid a song by Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive. I think that was brilliant.
Oh, I gotta hear that.
It's a good one.
Right up in my head,
it's
man.
good.
Cool.
It's good.
Great.
I like that too.
Bass driven. I mean, it's just a fantastic
Cool.
cover. Yeah.
Cool.
I love playing that song.
Me too.
It's a fun song to play, man.
Yep.
My turn.
Of course.
Now I have to do this, and I don't know why, but it's going back to Van Halen because they had great cover tunes. They covered songs great.
They made a whole album,
They
right?
yeah, pretty much.
Was Diver Down? Was it
Diver
called-
Down?
Diver
Pretty
Down?
much, yeah.
Right.
But man,
It's called No Material.
yeah, right. You're No Good.
Oh.
I love that song, the way they covered it, and to this day, that's if I want to do a cover tune, that's the tune I want to cover.
That's a good one.
And, you know, and
That's
it's just,
a good one.
because when you think of it, you're thinking of you know, the way it was done originally, and then you have, you know, now you're rocking it out with a male voice.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Pretty Woman was a good cover.
Freddie Woman's a great
Yeah.
cover.
Come on, Fred.
I'm gonna have to go with All Along the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix.
Oh.
That's a Bob Dylan
Bob
tune.
Dylan
Damn
tune.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
That might be the winner
And
there.
I mean, it's
the winner there.
super iconic.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't
Dave
even play,
Matthews Band
they don't
does
even
a
play Bob Dylan's version. Good
Yeah.
luck trying to hear that on the radio.
Yeah.
Who was the all acoustic folk singer? He wasn't a singer, but a folk player. Oh my God, he's a lot of alternate tunings. Died like maybe 15, 20 years ago.
Guthrie?
Michael Hedges.
Oh, Hedges.
Michael Hedges, you got to listen to his version on talk about a guy that plays 3 different guitar parts simultaneously on an acoustic. He plays All Along the Watchtower, and he sings it, I think, too.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Michael Hedges. That's definitely one. I like Kiss. God Gave Rock and Roll to You, but that's because it sounds like a Kiss song. It's written by Argent, but that song is big, lumbering.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
I love that song.
God Gave Rock and Roll to You is by Argent.
That's
the
off
same
of-
band that said Hold Your Head Up.
Nice.
You know, Bill and Ted's Big Adventure.
Yeah,
or
that's how I
something
heard.
like
That's
that.
how I heard that song.
Exactly.
But that's an Argent song. But it's big, powerful, and lumbering. And I like when bands don't rush. The '80s, in the early '80s especially, for your legacy bands, when they moved into the '80s, everything, the tempo of everything, like I can't listen to Aerosmith live from the early '80s.
Cocaine. Everything was.
Well, all the Kiss stuff in the early '80s, like the pitch went higher, and it also got sped up. I liked it when they even sometimes tuned down a half step,
Right.
or went down to the right tuning, and then did it at the right pace. I thought it was good and powerful, and sometimes it's a little sludgy, but it's good. You know, like I think about Sabbath when Iommi, the last run they did was the late 90s, 2000. I saw them in 99 with Pantera. And everything was tuned down another half step for Ozzy's voice, which put some of these, which were already down a whole step, down another half. So it was really almost guttural, but real slowed down, like when they played War Pigs, that first opening chord of War Pig, boom, and there's just something which is right up your alley. Something that really just kind of makes your fucking
the guitar strings got to be so loose at that point, you know,
because he used 8s. You know, I mean, it's just like,
I've been very lucky to see Black Sabbath with Ozzy 13 times.
Oh, right, that's awesome.
Cool.
And I even went over to the Download Festival in London to see, because when Tony Iommi was was diagnosed with cancer, I thought this was going to be the last time I'll ever see Black Sabbath.
Yeah, right on.
So you went over?
So I went over to London
with the other drummer, with the young kid.
The young kid was there.
Tony
Kufalos.
Tommy. Yeah, Tommy.
Yeah. But my God, I mean, I've been front row staring at Tony Iommi, looking at his little things on his fingers, little caps.
Dude.
And just staring at
that acoustic behind you. Fred and I made for Tony Iommi.
That's
right behind
the
you.
one behind you.
We closed Boogie Street before we were able to give it to him. So Tony, if you're seeing this, you're more than welcome. Let me know where to fly and give it to you. We wanted to get a Washburn deal on the acoustic side for Tony. So we had that research to the right crosses from the John Birch guitars in the 70s. Yeah, we just never got
lefty?
it to him.
Yeah, he's lefty.
We never got it to him.
It's a lefty guitar.
Yeah.
What about Geezer, man? What a bass player. How many people talk about Geezer?
He's so overlooked.
He's so overlooked.
Did you ever see him like in Sabbath Live?
Never.
Like pull any Sabbath Live video out and just watch him play. It's nuts.
Yeah. I love watching good bass players. You know, I'm going to butcher his name, John Entwistle.
John Entwistle.
Well, he might have been. I mean, he might be. The Ox was something, man.
He was. Just watching footage of that guy, you know.
And Geddy Lee plays some very complex stuff, but I think what makes Geddy so special is because he's doing the keyboards and everything else.
And singing.
Yeah.
But the Ox is a motherfucker, man.
Oh, he's a great player.
What do they call Thunder something. Not Thunder Lips, Thunder something.
Thunder Lips is Hulk Hogan in Rocky 3.
In Rocky 3.
Thunder Fingers.
I thought Thunder Lips was what's her name? Loretta Swit on MASH.
Oh, that was
Hot Lips.
Hot Lips.
Okay.
Hot Lips Hooligan. You've confused blondes. Hulk Hogan and Loretta Swit. It happens.
That's a big confusion right there. Yeah, thundering bass, man. Bass players. Bringing the bottom end. Best bass player you ever seen? Whether it's live or whether it's just
you know,
best bass player you ever seen.
I've seen Primus many times. Les Claypool is
Les
a monster.
is out there, man. He's out there though.
But I just saw this band. They're from Germany. They're called Cadaver.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're a power trio, and they're kind of like a stoner rock.
Yeah.
But man, the bass player in that band, dude, he can lay it down. He was. After the first song, he was like dripping in sweat.
Right
I literally
on.
I literally had to step back because I'm like, this guy's going to sweat all over me. They played Spirit in Lawrenceville.
Yeah, right on.
When I heard they were coming to town, because I got turned on to them when I was in Los Angeles doing a movie, and my buddy's like, "Oh, did you ever hear this band Cadaver?" And I'm like, "No, I never heard of them." And he showed me their album. And I'm like, this ain't from like last year. And these guys look like 1977.
Yeah,
you know?
right on.
Boy,
I could check that out.
Check them out, man. Cadaver with a K.
You?
There's a band out that I've been seeing now. I probably saw them like 5 or 6 times now. They're called Lettuce. I don't think you guys ever heard of them, but they derived the name from "Let Us Play for You," that type of thing. But there's this bass player in the band, and they're like a funk jazz, like a funky jam band.
Okay.
They don't really have a lot of lyrics. It's just a lot of musical stuff that goes on stage. And their bass player, they call him Jesus. He's he lays it.
You can't make that up, man.
He lays it down, man. He'll have your tail feather shaking for sure in the crowd. So that's, check them out. Lettuce. Okay. Yeah.
You?
Man,
it's gotta be a hard one for you.
It's a hard one for me. It's hard.
You know J-Mo personally, so he might smack you in the head.
You know what, J-Mo,
James Lomenzo.
He's amazing. and he's about the next closest thing to Entwistle.
I was going to say, yeah,
and because he's perfect. You know, James is like, you know.
I always said he was too perfect for Black Label.
Well,
like he was too good.
Well, here's the thing. This is a little side thing. Is I think that at one time, you know, you had Broderick and Lomenzo in Megadeth, and you're talking about two cats that play note perfect. You know what I mean? And everybody's like, they're like robots. They're like robots, but they were note perfect. Lomenzo's note perfect. But for me. And I got the honor to work for Geezer one time, and it was just to watch him up close and to work with him. He was great. Billy Sheehan was great. Trying to think of you know, great bass players like that. You know, it just, you know, Entwistle, the John Paul Jones. It goes on,
Yeah.
but then you got to get into the funk guys like Larry Graham and Bootsy Collins.
Yep.
These cats,
Yeah.
you know, they're insane. But
we made a bass for Bootsy, remember?
yeah, we had the star bass,
The Starbase.
and then
we made a couple versions of that for him.
to watch
We should put
somebody
a picture up in here.
watch somebody live, watching Les Claypool live is just amazing. What he does on those with a fretless bass and shit like that. But yeah, I'm gonna say, you know, my favorite bass player is Nikki Sixx. Now, my you know, for influence, it would have to be, you know, you got to get down in the Geezer and stuff like that, because to watch the guy back in the day, it's either him or John Paul Jones. They just put all those things, and they're tasteful. They're not overplaying with extra notes like some bands from Canada, but they're but they play tasteful.
He's talking about Triumph.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I'm totally growing up. I mean, just to listen to what Geezer was doing, and to listen to what John Paul Jones was doing.
Yeah.
So those are my top two.
I
and then
don't-
Lomenzo.
I don't think of John Paul Jones as being a spectacular bass player, although I've heard him playing like a 12-string guitar when he came solo here about 10 years ago. That was unbelievable. So I guess he is. I think more about him with the whole composition, with all the keyboards. and
Yeah,
stuff.
he was an arranger.
But I have to give it to the Aux, man. And Whistle, if you can somehow look on YouTube and look for the bass track only on any Who live song.
Oh, listen to like Real Me and stuff like that.
The Real Me.
Crazy
That,
shit.
yeah. You just it's sickening. It's
Yeah.
like what I mean, and I think he just does it with no facial expression, like he's put off, like he's just bored out of a skull, you know. But and he liked to party, right? Fred?
That's how I wanna go.
I got to party his ass off, man. To me, though, to be honest with you, man, I know Victor Wooten and Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, and that Victor Wooten emerged from there as the de facto king of bass. He leaves me flat. Like I try to listen as a jazz. When I'm in a jazz mood, I listen to Victor Wooten. I appreciate it, but for me, man, Stanley Clarke is the fucking top of the heap.
he's
I mean,
tight.
because he can give you that R&B vibe in a heartbeat, and then go eclectic on modern jazz, and go obtuse thing, pull up an upright, and go, and go 1930s Count Basie on you. But Stanley Clarke, and then I think it cemented it for me. I saw Stanley Clarke live a couple times. Once at the Friends Winery in the '90s, there was a winery, and remember her Friends Winery? He rolled up on they brought a flatbed truck at the bottom of this field, and he played with another blind jazz pianist called Joe McBride. Look him up. He's a national artist. I'm still connected with Joe on Facebook. Nicest guy. He was the opener. Kenny Blake, the
Nice.
sax player from Pittsburgh, was also opening for that show. But I went for Stanley, and we were drinking wine. It was a nice night, and there's Stanley Clarke on a flatbed truck, with two other guys, a drummer and a guitar player, and he's just like, I can't explain it. And it isn't a flurry. He can do that, but he plays that short scale Olympic, a 32-inch short scale, so it's with a tall guy like that, it looks like he's playing a guitar. But it's a 4-string bass that they make for him. And just to see him go, and then listening to those recordings and things he done with Najee and things he's done with Darren Johnson. There's an album called Stanley Clarke and Friends. I recommend this to anybody. Stanley Clarke at the Greek. It's Najee, Darren Johnson, Larry Carlton,
Nice.
and Stanley Clarke, and Billy Cobham. on
wow.
drums, and it's like 5 songs, and he pulls Larry Carlton's song Stratus by Billy Cobham, and then at the end he just gets into School Days, man, and he just that to me is the de facto bass player that's walked the planet. The bass was made for that guy. I mean, if there is somebody to go above him, I haven't encountered him yet from my standpoint.
Jocko.
Jocko.
Yeah, Jocko.
Yeah, and I indulged in a lot of that. That was up my alley with the jazz fusion stuff, but he did a lot of fretless stuff, right?
Yeah.
And fretless has its own sound that never really ultimately appealed to me in a big way. So there was always, maybe it was a tonal thing, but you can't argue. Is it true that Jocko used to take chicken grease from, like, he would eat like chicken out of a bucket and put that grease all over his hands, and then he would play because it would provide that tackness. Did you ever hear that? That's like a thing. He would put chicken grease.
Never heard it, and I would go nuts if somebody touched my bass with chicken grease.
No, I think that's that was his thing. I'm pretty sure that was Jocko's thing, man. Like, Diomi has the fingertips, and Jocko had the chicken grease.
Oh.
Anyone listening to it, yeah, that's a...
Flea's a great bass player too.
Flea's an amazing bass
Yeah.
player. Yeah, and there's probably, like we talked, there's technical people out there that have probably burned to the dirt anyone we mentioned here. But it isn't always about who can play the Florida notes. You know, I always thought Yngwie Malmsteen was this interesting player to watch play because it was just nuts to see him go all over the fingerboard quickly. So dexterity wise, but his playing left me, relatively speaking, kind of flat. I didn't get anything out of it. So I think to have that dexterity and that showmanship, but also resonate with people, that's when you're going to get paid.
Yeah, right. I mean, you like to a good point with that. Like, you had like Yngwie, but then it was different. It was new. But then you had cats like Paul Gilbert that came in and just it's just, and then you had Vi who finally hit it big, and Alcatraz and
Nuno Betancourt.
Nuno, yeah.
We worked with them. How did I forget Nuno?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could ever throw. I was going to let you throw that out there.
And it was, oh man, he's a good dude. That's a good one. He was he had his own style.
Like he got lost in the shuffle, man. Unfortunately,
but his tone, dude. Yeah. He was at Washburn on 2 instances for artist relations issues, and I worked with him, but not closely. But I watched him play electric on an not an N4, but an N6 we were doing for him at the time, mid 2000s, at Washburn, and I watched him in a sound room. I couldn't go in the sound room; I wasn't permitted, but I could watch through the glass and hear. And there was something just above norm there. You could just tell everything about where he went mentally at that 10 minutes. It was just nuts. Like it's another planet. And if you listen to some of those songs, I mean, he's got like he likes his neck humbuck or neck pickup. And I love, like, Joe Perry is a big neck pickup guy. It's got that, backed off kind of tone, and I like that because so used to all these straight ahead players always playing in the bridge position. You hear someone that really understands their instrument, uses everything with their instrument. There's something to be said for that.
Yeah, you look at a guy like Gilmore. I mean, what made him great? Yeah, what made him great? A, was his tone, and B, the simplicity. He had a simplistic approach to his solos,
dude.
That were so melodic.
It's what he didn't play
exactly
that made him amazing.
Exactly.
Like I had this emotional moment like 3 weeks ago. I was listening to Comfortably Numb. I saw it on YouTube, and then I put it on my stereo. I must have been like in a melancholy mood, and I got a text from my buddy Jim, and I said, Jim, I'm sitting here weeping, man. I texted him back. I said, I guess, what are you doing? I go, I'm in my house alone, and I got emotional, and I heard Comfortably Numb. And I wasn't emotional about anything in my life. I wasn't. I was emotional about how fucking beautiful the tone was on a live version. Maybe it was the 87 Delicate Sounds of Thunder. I don't know what version it was, but it was the tone of David Gilmour, and seeing him extract and bleed those notes out so long.
Right.
And just like the sea of people, humanity that is just so entrenched. He captivates like the human emotion in big gatherings of people. That's fucking power, man.
I was laughing. I watched that you said that because I watched every once in a while I'll put on like reaction videos on YouTube, and it was a woman hearing Comfortably Numb for the first time, and she cried.
Wow.
And she's like, this is beautiful. She said it just takes you to a place you know, that you know, it makes you. She said she was
Have
so
you got-
happy.
Have you ever been to a concert and cried?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh,
yeah.
dude! I'm embarrassed to even tell you.
Oh yeah,
I had my first experience when Chicago came around and they played the whole Chicago #2 album.
Yeah, I bet you lost it.
I couldn't believe it, for one.
Yeah.
And I'm there with my wife, and I'm sitting there listening, and I'm just like, even though these aren't the same guys from
Yeah.
who created it back then, but
It doesn't matter.
these guys put everything into it. It was sounded so wonderful, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm
Dude, the fact that you can admit that is so cool, because I was afraid. I was actually going to ask you the same exact question. All of you, because I've had moments like that where
that was it for me.
yeah. About you,
I
or
have
get
to-
emotional.
Well, you know, I don't know that I actually shed tear, but I will say I got pretty emotional at the Grateful Dead's last Three Rivers show. That was
Okay.
'95.
That's because they were thumbtacking you with LSD. See,
Well, that's true. That's true. But that whole rain set in the second set, when it just downpoured, it was a perfect downpour. There was no lightning, no thunder. It was just downpour. And
Right.
these guys are on stage, and you know, they're playing 4 songs that dealt with rain. You know, Box of Rain,
Right.
Samba in the Rain,
right?
and when they played Looks Like Rain, and I could hear Jerry's guitar, and it almost sounded like fucking rain, you know, at that very moment. And I'm just like, wow, this is almost spiritual for me. It probably was LSD, but
It wasn't even raining.
and then to think that it wasn't even raining.
That is so good. That is so
But
good.
you know, and to think that the guy was gone in another 3 months. Now I look back at that and I'm like, wow, that really was an emotional thing that I didn't even realize at the
Yeah.
time. You know, so
Yeah. What's
The
you?
Dead can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What's you, man? When things go out of tune side stage, how many times you crying, Fred?
I cry all the time. I'm like, I didn't do that. You
I mean, how often do you get a chance to go and watch music
anymore?
I mean, like, you know, like those times are rare because
Yeah.
you're seeing so much of the same all the time.
Yeah.
To work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually, you know, again, just I actually do it more often than not. It's kind of weird because just
You
like
go alone a lot too. You don't tell anybody.
yeah, you know, I
there's
mean,
a lot to be said for that.
yeah, you know, I like to experience the way I do. It's because I'm always at the side, and I don't have like the best. You know, I mean, yeah, you're there. It's seat wise, people would kill for that, but you don't really hear it. I've gone out to like front of house, and I'll say this, man. I cried at like a Sabbath show because it was like, wow, I'm here.
Yeah.
This
Dude,
is where
I
you know,
get it.
for like different reasons, you know.
Right.
And you know, and it's just like, wow, I'm here. I've had Pink Floyd, you know, shit like that, and it's just like, you know, the same thing. You know, music brings out emotion in you, and you know that's how you know it touches you. You know, it more often than not, I sit there and go, wow, this is when I get a chance to actually go out and listen to something cool. You know. You know, I mean, it's just it's supposed to touch you, and that's what it does.
So I now that we went there, thank you. 3 quick memories for me. I'll make them quick. Seeing Jimmy Page for the first time, and I was charity seats, and we bought them online in 1999 or 2000, 2001, and it was $200 a piece. I bought them for me and my friend as a gift, but I had no idea if it was real. I wasn't sure, you know, I'm gonna spend this $400 on my credit card. I sure hope. We went there and they gave us the tickets, row AA, seat 1 and 2, or no, seat one in the middle. I mean, dead center. And just looking up there and seeing Jimmy Page, knowing that I could have never got a chance to see him in Zeppelin. I was just too young, and I may never see him again, right? And he's playing Zeppelin songs. I mean, fuck the Crows. I liked the Crows, but it was like they were just there that night, and it sounded amazing. Robinson played great guitar. I mean, there was they had it going on. It was it sounded better than Zeppelin, but it was Jimmy Page, and coming through, and you see Jimmy's like slobbering and playing behind the beat. I had like a religious experience, man. I mean, I will tell you, I think I wept that night. But Kiss reunion tour '96 was a month after my brother had passed, and he had tickets, and you know, we had the whole crew. There was Hobbs and the Angelos, all the
Angelos, yeah.
We had this whole crew of friends that were going to go, and we had dead on straight seats, you know, and our favorite band had gotten back together. The original four, my brother should have been there. So for me, from the moment like they hit the stage, I had to go the next night because I think I was so emotional the first night I didn't get all the my yayas out. The next night I wanted to go to fucking have it, but I was like, I think I cried like at a Kiss show because of what it meant to me for my friends and my it was just like holy shit, finally after watching this band with no makeup and wondering what it was like, and now that the original four, yada yada yada, and then the last one was in 2006. I had the guitar thing was going, and Fred will attest to what happened here. I got to see my childhood hero Paul Stanley came to Pittsburgh, a solo tour. We took guitars down to give him as a gift to give to his son and show him the kind of work we were going to do. We didn't know how he was going to respond. It rained like a sieve. We were having trouble getting there. They locked us out of the doors that were supposed to be open for us. And this guy said, fuck this. We ain't waiting in line. Come on. We go in the back, and Fred's beating on the stage door at the Palace Theater in Greens. We're beating on it. Till they let us in, and Fran met us, and then like the whole world opened up. And and I didn't even think I was going to get a chance to see Paul. I just wanted to give the guitars to the, we had good seats. And I got a photo pass. That was my big thrill. I'm gonna photograph Paul Stanley. Well, we're down there, and Fred goes, "Well, I'm not going to stand here. I'm going to go sit in the seat." And they sent this big burly security guy down, and he taps me on the shoulder. I go, he goes, "Are you Eric?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Come with me." I looked at Fred, and Fred's like, and he goes, "Is that Fred?" And I said, "Yeah, that's Fred right there." And he looked at Fred and goes, "Come with me." And we walked up there. And we met Fran in the hallway. It's like I have a movie. And fucking Fran walks us down and he goes, "Right in here, guys." And he opens up this door. And Fran, like in the movie, puts his hand up. There you go. And I walk in there. Now, no big deal to Fred because he's, but to me, I'm losing my fucking shit.
Right.
And I walk in and there's fucking Paul Stanley playing with his knee up on a ottoman, playing one of the guitars we had given him. And maybe 10 minutes we were there, 15 minutes, whatever. But it was like... I mean, I didn't cry at that moment, but it was later in that night. So then I went down, took the pictures, and then I took the pictures for the first 3 songs. That was cool. And then I couldn't stand there past the first 3 songs, but I didn't go join Freddie at the seat. I went and stood side stage, and then Fran took me up and said, "Hey, come on, stand up here." So I'm standing there, right? And my whole life is flashing in front of me. Like, I know it sounds corny, but hear me out. The whole life is flashing in front of me. My brother... The fact that I've loved this band because of that guy. It's his songs that I dig. That's the soundtrack of my life. He's here as a middle-aged guy doing a solo gig, playing those songs in a band that blows Kiss away, right? It's like this experience, like, holy fuck, and I am now going to make guitars with this guy.
There you have it.
This is insane. Like, how... I'm some schmuck from Coriopolis, it's Milltown in Pittsburgh. How the fuck did this happen to me? So that, in its entirety, was my most emotional moment. But
I got emotional just thinking about it. You telling it?
Well, dude, it was. It was an amazing time. It was like it was surreal. It was like, but listening to those songs and having him Stanley go in deep and pull things off his solo record and things that like he picked the songs that I, as a Paul Stanley fan,
would have picked.
Thought like was his best work. He must have agreed with me because that's what, he picked Million to One off of Lick It Up, just deep stuff, and Move On by the solo record. It was just one of those moments where, and it was. I remember going home and going, it's really the power of music. Maybe not even that concert, but the power of music in general has changed my entire life. The love of music set me on a different course. It's very similar probably to how much you loved movies and the horror genre as a kid, and you willed it to happen. You made that a part of your life, and it really worked out for you. And that's how I want to conclude this today, because we have to talk about your fucking movie, man. I know you probably don't want to, but we want to. Fred and I, we want to.
Oh, I brought it.
Yes.
I'm very honored you're here today, buddy.
Thank
It means a lot,
Fred, Nancy.
Yeah. So how's it doing?
Oh, it's doing good. I mean, I really wish I was doing the convention thing and going out and meeting the fans. And I'm a good salesman. I like going out there and hitting the pavement, and kind of like being a band, going out and showing my wares. But I'm doing the Facebook thing now and social media. I wish I just had more time on it. You know, with work.
Right on.
It's tough. But again, this is my best movie. Very, very proud of this film.
I you know what? And I'll say
I've watched it multiple times.
I'll pop it in. I do. If I'm sitting down, I pop it in. That's. I've watched it several times.
I had to watch a couple times to get it. Like the ending's got that thing to it, man.
Yeah.
And I have to watch it again because I got it, but I didn't get it. You know.
Well, I like to make you think.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it, man.
I hate when so much plot is just shoved down your throat, and you just I get it, and it's over. And you don't think about it. It makes me feel really good that you guys continue to watch it because that means I did something right as a filmmaker to keep you invested into the story that you already know.
It definitely deserves a broader audience, and I'm hoping that happens, especially when it opens up here. I mean, it's just the promotion. Are there plans for or at least ideas, anyways, for plans in 2022 once we're hopefully, Yeah,
open? I definitely like to do something. Kind of like a movie release party and show the movie and bring Granger and Diane and Damien back in.
That'd be
awesome.
That'd be
because we saw it. We saw it at the convention.
Yeah,
we saw it when it premiered at the convention, and it was nice. It was. I love to see it on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
To have it like at the Biome or like someplace that
And I hope to have. I really hope to have that. It's just we're kind of in the middle of a pandemic.
Exactly, and that's what sucks.
Well, let me ask you this: you were here at the start of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we're he was about a year ago.
About a year ago.
He was here. That's hard to believe. It's already been a year.
About a year ago, because that's when it.
Because it wasn't out yet.
It wasn't out yet.
It wasn't out yet. It was coming out.
Right. So how's this year been for you? I mean, like now that you can look back on it.
You know what? I kind of like, as much as it sucked for a lot of people, it didn't suck that bad for me. I got to spend a lot of time with my wife. And because she was a bartender and I'm a filmmaker, so I didn't get a chance to see her very often. And then we were seeing each other every day.
Right.
We went hiking and walking and really just took the time to like enjoy the outside, where I'm always inside watching television and stuff. So it kind of changed the way that I lived.
Cool.
And the movie came out and it did, the initial sales were really great, and it kind of, just like anything, it kind of fizzles off until something else happens with it. So right now I'm just playing the waiting game.
Yeah, I'm hoping, man. Last year, Fred was saying, look, everybody's hoping for 21, but you said it, because it's probably going to take another year before 22. It really starts the fruition of everything. I think that's how it's playing out.
It's going to be. It's 22. You got some cats that want to go out and do things. Now, I mean, our industry, we just came back with what Archive came back last year.
Yeah.
But they were ahead of the curve. But the movies that I've done this year, or the TV shows that I've done this year, I mean, it's February. I mean, it started in like February,
right?
And it's still going strong. And we've got our guidelines set.
Yeah.
But he was on the one that they led the way for.
It did. We were doing COVID testing like 3 times a week.
Right.
And getting these little devices that you would have to wear.
Right.
So if we were too close, let's say you got COVID, and they would know that I was with you.
Like a tracking.
It was tracker is what it was, yeah. So they would show who we were in contact with.
Yeah.
Me, I would just put 2 of them together and just walk around. Just stand as close to somebody as I could get.
But it's it's the little things that you miss. Like I miss seeing my friends' faces instead of all of us behind masks and
took so much for granted, didn't we?
Yeah, riding in the truck together.
Yeah,
or, now you have a lot of self-drive and.
I did self-drives to Cleveland, and it's just like worse because you could, at least back in the day, you go in the truck, you get your guys, you're sitting around, you talk, you go to sleep. Yeah, you can't really go to sleep on the way to Cleveland.
No, you can't.
But yeah, I mean, it's changed the industry.
It's totally changed the industry.
I bet.
Yeah.
Eric, you work downtown, right? You work in the courts.
I work in juvenile probation, and I've been home now for a year and a half.
So you haven't been down.
We only go when we have in-person hearings. That's only if it's going to trial.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so everything's been
it's
virtual.
All remote?
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something. It's probably going to stay that way. I think the judges love it. there's no reason to have people come down to a courthouse and have them coughing on each other in a dirty waiting room. And, you know, I mean, it's a,
so you think it'll remain that way?
Yeah. Well, for a while, we'll see. You know, it's been pretty well-oiled machine though. Like, you know, considering you have to make these adjustments kind of like on the fly. But,
how have you taken to like working remotely, like Zoom and the rest of it? Do you got it all figured out? I mean,
yeah, we use Microsoft Teams. It's pretty user friendly. And like I said, I think everybody's kind of figured it out at this point, and there's really no reason to go back.
You got to be home. I mean, the drive's got to be a grind, right?
Yeah, that always sucked. You know, the commuting, but. I do miss my people. I need to see my people. I'm very much a social butterfly.
Right on.
And so, you know, that's the one thing I miss the most.
Yeah, I know how you feel about it. We're getting through it, man. We're mowing through it.
We're not doing bad. We're not doing bad.
Guys, I appreciate this. Did you have a good time?
This was fun.
Yeah, it wasn't too long, but I told you I was going to keep you a while, flesh it out. But let's do this again too.
I must like you, man, because I'm missing a Penguin game right now.
I know. Well, yeah, I've got it on. It's telling me
Game
what the
one.
scores are.
Don't tell me the score because
it must be actually early in the day for Fred because he's not drinking, man. He's very rare. He's not tipping something back on his show.
I a little bit of vodka. That's what brought me to life.
Guys, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, until we reconvene again.
Great times.
All right.
Thank you.
Friends,
Thank you.
we are out.
Woo!
That was fun.
Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.